Late start. I've got a very, very special interview coming up in less than 20 minutes. Yeah, around there, 20 minutes. And as always, my audio drivers are completely botched. I've reinstalled them all. Hopefully the sound's okay. Hopefully my voice is coming in loud and clear. To the multiple people who were dropping into the Twitch TV chat at the start of the stream to say no ceasefire until all of the hostages are released. You might want to talk to Benjamin Netanyahu about that one, who has rejected multiple hostage release offers for terms of, say, 5-day ceasefires. Yes, 5-day ceasefires. What do you get for a 5-day ceasefire? What's the exchange going to be there? How about the release of children, the sick, the elderly, in exchange for 5-day ceasefire? That was an offer made to Benjamin Netanyahu, according to 3 separate sources who were present at the meetings, and it was rejected. So you live in the upside down at this point. Every single person right now who is just buying into just all the propaganda that is being force-fed to us at extreme measures right now in an attempt to try and quell the absolute breaking of the dam in terms of how all of this information is being processed, especially by younger generations who can see through a lot of this shit. They know how to use Google. I guess that happens to be your biggest enemy here, because the facts, the history, the reality of what is taking place, and what was taking place before, this latest slaughter of innocent civilians and children, that is available publicly to anyone who wants to spend a little bit of time doing research. And while doing that, and you start to come to the realization of what is happening is just beyond words. It's effectively going to continue to run a lot of difficulties for any single person who's still trying to push this. And you're seeing it reflected again in like yesterday. The Washington Post, I believe, was in the outlet that was reporting on how there's a new ceasefire negotiation that is taking place, a 5-day ceasefire negotiation, which is going to accommodate the release of some hostages. And they said that this will be in exchange for children, Israeli children, which is good. Absolutely. I think Israeli children should be released. They should not be prisoners. And it's going to be exchanged as well for Palestinian young people. That's how the whole thing is phrased. Israeli children, Palestinian young people. And I was like, how did you have to go that extra mile, that extra length? Did you have, were you sitting there in the editorial room or the editorial board and how can we just soften this a little bit, not say that's an exchange for children, so children, we don't really want to admit that there are perhaps child prisoners on the other side, so what do? Well, I mean, it would be weird if we didn't acknowledge, we could say prisoners. Why don't we do a little journalism here? We'll say young people. So Palestinian young people will be exchanged for Israeli children,
clean up your room,
as well as a short ceasefire. And yeah, that's what we'll do here. Did you know that Destiny is actually going back to some of his terrible positions on after and his friend confronted him? Not sure if he's fully on the right side, but I think he's at least supporting further to eradicate himself. Any progress is progress for Palestinians, in my opinion. Well, this is what I was trying to point out yesterday, and I got a lot of hate online from the left for saying that, hey, yes, I think it is, and I would never word it this. I think it's highly problematic, if not, downright horrifying to frame this and continue to frame this whole thing as a war. To keep saying this is a war between Israel and Hamas when it is a occupational slaughter, what is happening right now. And yeah, I understand why a lot of people are deeply offended that John Oliver chose to both title and do his segment in that way. You also have to understand that right now it is essential that more and more people become aware of the actual facts and history of what is taking place right now. And for 2.7 million people who watch HBO, not all of those 2.7 million people are as aware of what is taking place as you are. So there is a entirely net benefit and huge utility to having a segment like that segment was yesterday on John Oliver's show. Is it perfect? No. I would prefer to see him use terms like genocidal intent, ethnic cleansing, stuff like that. Stuff that you can easily say is reflected upon a lot of institutions that track this stuff. Scholars that study this stuff, over 800 scholars have signed a letter declaring that this demonstrates genocidal intent. Multiple organizations from Amnesty International to Human Rights Watch to Doctors Without Borders have used terms like ethnic cleansing, have used apartheid state. So you don't have to be as fearful when using those kind of terms publicly, when it is reflected by, again, experts who study this and have way more understanding of this than I ever will. But that being said, yes, there's a really, really important role to play in something like that being given to mainstream audiences, and I still think it's a net good. And I'm still going to say that, like, the very people who were calling it out based on a screenshot. You know, there was a screenshot of the episode and said the Israel-Hamas war, which I completely agree with you, to everyone who's furious at me. Yes, that is problematic in and of itself, but for the love of fucking God, we need a ceasefire, and we need one now, and that is only the fucking beginning. That is like the first step. That's just to stop the mass death that is happening. And it's one of those things where, yeah, I can sit in my bed or my chair and be cozy, you know, at night or in the morning, or enjoy all the comforts of not living in a fucking open conflict zone right now, in all, and having all the pleasures of the West that are afforded to me, and get real mad online at every single person who might be doing something towards what is necessary, right? Like, sometimes people ignore diversity of tactics, or diversity of methods, or just the reality. Sometimes I think people, especially if they are really, really deep into a topic or a subject or anything, and they've been analyzing or studying it for a long time, yeah, it is sad and gross that so many people don't understand what is happening. But I'd say it's even more essential that more people do learn about what is happening, because there's so many scenarios and so many situations in which you are going to have a large amount of people who are going to push back on anything you say in regards to this war, or this conflict, or this occupation, and they need to get information in whatever way they can. If that happens to be a podcast where all of a sudden something went wrong and the person who's being interviewed was like, that's just not true, and then all of a sudden it breaks the narrative or the paradigm, that's good. If John Oliver puts out a segment where he finally explains to people that, you know, Hamas is in part Israel's creation, that is a net good, to point out what a criminal Benjamin Netanyahu is, and how he's viewed as a criminal by a lot of Israeli people. How sometimes people forget the massive protests that were taking place in Israel about Benjamin Netanyahu's authoritarian power grab, and how angry a lot of Israelis are at Benjamin Netanyahu, and how authoritarian leaders do take opportunities that involve mass tragedies and horrifying events, such as October 7th, to then coalesce and utilize more power, even if it may be in defiance of the will of some of his population or a lot of his population. That is also fucking important, as is continuously sharing a lot of the stories. Like, right now, it's more difficult than ever for a lot of organizations to simply label any criticism of the Israeli government as simply being anti-Semitic by nature, because so many of the people leading so much of the protesting right now happen to be brave Jewish voices, happen to be Jewish Voices for Peace, if not now org, or rabbis showing up in huge numbers to directly say that this is against, the very religious laws that we ourselves hold sacred. That is incredibly brave of so many individuals to be doing right now, and people need to amplify that, reflect that, to bring noise to that. That is going to help, ideally, bring more people over than simply, gaining a couple points by saying John Oliver is a neoliberal corporate stooge, and we should spend a lot of our day shitting all over him now. That doesn't make you a shit lib simply for acknowledging that, you know, not everyone is where you're at in terms of your understanding right now on this. Even Van Jones accidentally helped, unless it was a secret plan to get booed. Yeah. All right, I've got 9 minutes to the interview, but there's a couple quick stories I wanted to look at.
Dateline 2023. The world is ravaged by a plague. No, we're not talking about the Rona. We're talking about the capitalistic death cult that values profits over the long-term health of humanity. What can be done to stop them and save the future of civilization? Find out only on Hard News.
Let's talk about censorship. Dead air. Is this stream no longer working? Something happened. Do you not see me? Or is it a delay? I don't know. It's working on the YouTubes. I see you. I see you. Okay. All right. Never mind. I don't know what's going on. Give me 1 sec. It's working on Twitch. Oh, it's just very quiet. Okay. My apologies. More than 1,700 lawyers and law students on Tuesday urged the American Bar Association to take action to combat the growing trend of censorship and discrimination against those voicing solidarity with Palestinians amid Israel's devastating bombing campaign, ground invasion, and siege in Gaza. Since Israel launched its latest military assaults on the Gaza Strip following a deadly Hamas-led attack on October 7th, there have been increasing instances of discrimination and censorship faced by Palestinian, Muslim, Arab, South Asian, Black, Indigenous, immigrant, and other communities within law school, universities, law firms, and other corporate entities, particularly due to their expression of support for the Palestinian people. These incidents include rescinding job offers, terminating employees, and harassing and doxing law students, amongst others. We share our grave concerns that the target of these incidents are law students and legal professionals seeking to uphold international law and Palestinian human rights. Censorship and retaliation cause democratic backsliding, against which our profession is one of the guardrails, and is antithetical to the very foundation of a free society. The letter, which also backed by a collective of more than 125 legal institutions, comes after Columbia University suspended 2 pro-Palestinian groups and the prominent New York-based law firm Davis Polk rescinded job offers from 3 Harvard and Columbia law students over their purported roles on campus organizations that signed a pair of statements in the wake of the October 7th attack. One of these statements extended heartfelt condolences to the individuals and communities at Columbia University affected by the tragic losses experienced by both Palestinians and Israelis, and argued that the weight of responsibility for the war and the casualties undeniably lies with the Israeli extremist government and other Western governments, including the US government, which fund and staunchly support Israeli aggression, apartheid, and settler colonization. The other statement released by the Harvard Palestinian Solidarity Committee argued the events of October 7th did not occur in a vacuum and stated the apartheid regime is the one to blame. Davis Polk is reconsidering its decision to the students after they objected to the recessions, saying they did not authorize these statements, neither of which named individual signatories. After former Harvard President Larry Summers condemned the Harvard Palestinian Solidarity Committee's statement on social media, Republican members of Congress and business leaders quickly seized on it and demanded retaliation against its signatories. Now, this is one of the reasons why I said before that the right and Republicans believe in nothing, because they simply have been screaming about how colleges and universities are liberal cuck farms that actually completely use the woke mind virus to poison and salt the mind until there's nothing that remains. The mind becomes a slug, and all of us just conform into groupthink. This is the idea that they've been telling you that universities are constantly, which I've obviously laughed at, because universities are massively profitable institutions. They are incredibly, incredibly wealthy. And if you look at different departments, some departments, yes, are a little bit more progressive, a little bit more left, for sure. A lot of departments are very, very, stalwart upholders of capitalism, including basically all of economics. There is going to be dissent on college campuses. This is obviously going to happen when you have a lot of based-ass young people on a college campus together, who are becoming self-aware of a lot of issues of the world and suddenly thinking that they need to do something to change it. So you will get protests, and you will get people who obviously oppose Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk or Lauren Southern showing up at a campus simply to get a couple of YouTube clips to promote their channels. That's going to happen. In terms of these institutions, though, suddenly being woke factories, No, that's never been the case. And the right and Republicans who have always been saying, and conservatives in Canada as well, that the censorship that happens from these woke mind institutions, well, here it actually is. And you're all fucking radio silent on that. No one's talking up about this. Canceling culture. Wow. Good timing, canceling culture. Thank you so much for subscribing. I appreciate that. Kilarna or Kiliarna, thank you very much for resubscribing with the Prime as well. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I've been asked by a number of CEOs if Harvard would release a list of the members of each Harvard organization that have issued the letter assigning sole responsibility for Hamas's heinous acts to Israel, so to ensure that none of us inadvertently hire any of their members. If, in fact, their members support the letter they've released, the names of the signatories should be made public so their views are publicly known. Like, we're seeing everything from students getting expelled for putting up do not support companies that fund apartheid stickers, to people who have said from the river to the sea, to you know, people like at a certain point, if you put if you hold a watermelon flag, you might get kicked out of school now in these institutions that are supposed to be you know, all about progressive and leftist ideals and all this kind of shit. The letter calls out the ABA to take steps to aid in the reversal of pervading atmosphere of fear and unlawful targeting of law students and lawyers, take proactive steps to protect their students from doxing campaigns, issuing public guidance signaling its intolerance against any and all forms of discrimination and retaliation. I haven't watched it yet, but I am aware, I'm also going through puberty apparently. I am aware that Glenn Greenwald has started to call out Fox News. I know he went on the Vanguard. If we have time, I want to watch it. But his whole, like, Fox News is now endorsing censorship. Well, I do want to simply add that this is happening at a time where he's lost his show, aka Tucker Carlson's show, because Tucker Carlson's not on Fox News anymore. And I know Fox News does still put him on a show or two here and there, but nowhere near like you know, Tucker Carlson used to. So I just want to say that it's rather than it simply being that Glenn Greenwald is as principled as ever, and now he's calling out Fox News, I do want to add that the timing is also kind of rich, and he is also doing a lot of shows still with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson doesn't have the same reach that he once did. I know you might hear that Tucker Carlson is more popular than ever thanks to the streaming platform X. And those numbers, wow, they speak for themselves. They're higher than the Super Bowl, according to Elon Musk. But if you listen to Matt Binder or anyone who actually understands how a lot of that works out, it's not actually the same as the impressions or views in the way that he's advertising it. It's actually rather pathetic. Yeah. Tucker Carlson is on my list of most punchable faces. I'm adding the Twin Flames cult leader to that list because holy hell, I've never met anything like that. All right, everybody, I've got Tamoor coming on right now. So let me just set this up, and I'm going to play this while I set up the audio.
U.S. politician. Sorry, that's against the rules. So let's break the rules. And if we're going to break the rules, you need to know them. Bribery of a politician is illegal, or at least our legal system thinks it should be. There's 3 major court decisions that built up to the loophole we're going to use. Because a mistake was made along the way that legalized the bribery of any US politician. Now, in a perfect crime-ridden world, we could just give money directly to politicians in exchange for something. Quid pro quo. But our first court decision in 1976 prevents that. Buckley versus Vallejo. The Supreme Court rules that it is constitutional to limit donations to political campaigns. Because if you can't give $100,000 to a candidate, and you're limited to something like $3,000, that makes it very unlikely the candidate will do something for you. We've got senators accepting gold bars out here. Good luck bribing someone for $3,000. The limit also applies to political action committees, PACs, which take donations, then give the money to candidates. You, as of right now, can only donate $5,000 to a PAC per election cycle. But you're a millionaire, and you're looking to bribe someone. So 5K is just not going to cut it. 2010, Citizens United versus the FEC. The Supreme Court rules that as long as a corporation doesn't coordinate with candidates, there's no possibility of them corrupting candidates. That limiting the spending of a corporation to advocate for or against any political candidate is an infringement on free speech. The free speech of the corporation, of course. This overruled the 1990 Supreme Court decision that said it was constitutional to limit corporations' spending on elections, because if corporations could spend as much as they want to promote candidates, it would distort the political process. That's what the old one said. Thank God we fixed that, right? So now, corporations can spend as much as they like to help out a politician's campaign as long as they're not coordinating. But you want to bribe a politician, and you still can't donate any more than $5,000 to a PAC. Those limits are still there. So we need our third court case, speechnow.org versus the FEC, also in 2010. Almost immediately after Citizens United, with Citizens United ruling that independent expenditures by corporations have no risk of corrupting an election. Then neither do donations to those corporations. That's the logic. This is where the mistake was made. And if your donation has no risk of corruption, no risk of quid pro quo, then Buckley doesn't apply anymore. It's unconstitutional to stop you from donating as much money as you want to a corporation, and it's unconstitutional to
I'm going to finish this. Austin Ox has done very, very good work. I'm just going to see right now if this works on the first try.
Hello.
Hi, Tamoor. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. How are you doing?
Fantastic. It's amazing this worked on the very first try. Normally I have a lot of leftist audio issues, so this is wonderful.
Leftist audio issues.
Yeah. Welcome to the show. This is the managing editor of Gamespot, and I have to admit, I think you have what I wanted to have as a child, my dream job, to say the very least. Before we get into all that, and obviously, talk about the politics that are going on right now in the world, I wanted to quickly ask, how did that come about? How did you rise to the ranks to be where you are today?
Yeah, so I guess like the first thing I want to say is like everything I talk about here, like, and everything I've been doing for the last few weeks is entirely off my own. I don't want it to represent GameSpot in any way, and that's something that I'm saying for the safety of myself and also the people that work there and that kind of stuff. So yeah, in terms of like getting that job, I'm extremely lucky in that it is very much a mixture of luck and hard work and some really tricky circumstances. But yeah, I started writing about video games when I was a kid. I used to just do it for fun. Like I'd play a game and write something about it on a piece of paper, and eventually like I would end up writing stuff onto documents in Word, and like I'd send in reviews unprompted to video game magazines and that kind of stuff that I read, and eventually it got to the point where I had like inadvertently built up a portfolio to a degree. And then I kind of went through the highs and lows of getting a law degree, mostly lows, mostly lows. So, and then I reached a point where I was like, do I really want to carry on doing the legal course, knowing that I've been miserable through most of it? And that was when I decided I'm just going to try and get a job in the video game industry, and got lucky to a degree. Worked on a few small companies, Future, and left for a while, and then got hired at GameSpot as a writer, and then slowly over the years kind of work my way up to managing editor.
Did you finish getting a law degree and then go as far as passing? And did you pass the bar? And
I did not pass. I did not pass the bar. That was where I was like at the crossroads. So I got my degree in university, and then it was like, do I continue and commit to this path, or do I, rethink what I'm doing? And I chose to rethink what I was doing and not commit to law, to the disappointment of my parents.
Well, I was gonna say, I've also been told that's not an easy thing to do, to do the LSAT first and then get a law degree.
No, and like we had, I was very fortunate in that I had a very candid teacher at the university, who taught law, and was like, hey, some of you guys are going to have a much easier time than others in this field, and that is down to things that you definitely cannot control, and those have been decided based on where you were born and what you look like. And that was a significant kind of like influence in what I was thinking she was a person of color, and she was very, very open about that. And I was like, do I want to do an uphill struggle where I'll have to fight tooth and nail for every opportunity and not enjoy it along the way, or do I want to take a very low paying job that I'm excited about on a day-to-day basis and doesn't feel like work?
Well, I was
Yeah.
going to say, and then the video game industry, famously not dominated by white people and known for
Oh
its.
yeah. yeah. I mean, you have to make some concessions for happiness in this case.
So once you got into GameSpot and you started climbing the ranks, how did you work your way to becoming the managing editor?
Honestly, again, it's like a mixture of like I love this website. I've been a fan of it. It was like I read it as a kid, and I always
Me too.
dreamed of everyone dreams. Like it's one of the two major websites, right? And it always felt like a pipe dream, but it was something that in my darker times I always just like thought about as a wistful like fantasy. And through just like again like a bit of work and I say a bit of work. I spent a lot of time trying to improve my writing and doing investigative journalism and writing features that hopefully would get noticed and that kind of stuff. And I worked on blogs and a lot of years of not getting anywhere or getting any payment for it and that kind of stuff. And got here, and it was kind of like from there dream job where I committed to the website and I did my best as I worked as hard as I possibly could every day. And over time, again, it was like a mixture of people leaving and me working myself into a position where I think people looked at me as reliable. And I guess that's what people want when you're when they're looking for someone else to lead a team, and like represent a website and manage the entire operation. And I think I just did enough for people to feel comfortable to let me do that. And I've been fortunate in that no one's figured out that I can't do it and kick me out. So I'm sure someone will figure it out eventually. And
So you've gone through this at a time when I think the video game industry has gone through so many different waves. Obviously, there was the reckoning of Gamergate, and then there's obviously been a lot more focus these days paid upon the crunch or the exploitation of workers or the sexual harassment that is so prevalent in the video game industry. How have you felt that's kind of maybe changed or affected both the way you manage your team and how coverage is on a lot of these topics?
yeah, I think now more than ever, there is a desire to engage that subject matter. And it's a desire that many people have actioned upon and acted upon. And it can often be to the detriment of you and where you work and your own personal health and safety. But it also has a lot of value in it. I feel like, as is the case right now with speaking up about Palestinian issues, you do that knowing that you're in an industry that is quite toxic in a lot of ways. I'm not one of those people who's a pessimist about the video game industry. I feel like there's a lot of good in there, and the people are like amazing. There's communities that are really wholesome. I know hundreds of people that work in this industry that are just some of the best people I've ever met in my lifetime. But these days, I feel like it's a difficult balancing act where you want to engage those topics because one, they're important to you. Two, they're important to the industry. And three, for me, it's like people who engage with video games may not realize how they're important to video games. These are kind of behind the scenes, inside baseball things they looked at that might have more of an impact on the long term viability and health of the video game industry than most video game fans are aware of. And these are also the kind of people who will immediately be like, keep politics out of video games, just talk about games. They're the same people who probably don't realize why it's important to talk about these certain things, whether it's the way that women are treated in the industry. Like for example, like you create a hostile environment for women in the industry, you get less women in the industry, and women are talented, and whether it's writing, art, or any of the disciplines that are required to make video games, you're effectively narrowing the pool if you're not addressing the idea or the evidence that is out there that it's hard for them to work in the industry. Same for people of color. You if you create systems and and situations where people of color can't rise up and get into positions where they have some sort of influence on the art that they create or we consume, you are just going to get the same kind of thing forever. And there's going to be real no perspective, like there's no merit to a lot of it. And games that are the most memorable are often created by teams that are multi-faith, multicultural, multiracial, multi-gendered, whatever you want to say, like all walks of life. So those are issues that I feel like are super, super important and to engage with. From a kind of perspective of me and how I run the team, my goal, or like the thing that I try and tell myself, is try to lead with from a place of empathy. And I feel like that helps in a lot of ways, whether it's for issues that like we know inherently are important, like we have spoken up about the Gaza situation before on the website, and we've done it for Black Lives Matter. It's if we know that it's important, kind of channeling that empathy just means that we can act upon it. But it's also empathetic. You have to show empathy for people who are on the team for situations and issues that you may not know about. Like I don't have a complete grasp of all the issues around the transgender people. I have done my best to understand it, and that is because I don't have that life experience. But when someone who's on the team that has an understanding of transgender issues or racial issues or gender issues, whatever it may be, um, comes to me and says, hey, this is something that I want to write about, or this is something that is impacting me, or this is something that I wish we would speak up about, I just try and approach it as from a place of empathy, where it's like, you are someone that I work with, you're someone that I care about, you're a friend, and I want to understand it. So I will do my best to use whatever platform we have in a way that we can, to kind of raise awareness in it. And I never do it in a way that I hope it feels preachy. I always want to do it in a way that it's relevant, and it's always like, this is why it's important. You may not agree with it, but there's a person here who loves video games, exists in the industry, that is going to talk about it and try and explain to you why it's important for video games, people that make games, people that care about games. So it's kind of like that, just that approach from empathy, just try and be decent. It's a very like a simple but like effective way of going through life, I think.
As a, someone who's got a positive outlook on this, do you think you are starting to see enough of a shift where it's acceptable or even not as dangerous perhaps to criticize aspects of major, say, corporations from a major platform like yourself?
uh I would say I don't think it's safe completely. I feel like you can make calculated risks and take calculated decisions. I will never say, as someone that is like very vocal about the things that I like, I do that every time I hit tweet, every time I post that Instagram. I do it knowing full well that I could lose my job, could lose my position here in America, and completely upend my life. Those are calculated risks that I'm willing to make on my part. I feel like a lot of other people will also factor that in when they're talking about the things that they are making statements about. I f- Times are changing, and these kind of teams are built up of people who are way more forward thinking and a little more, again, empathetic to other people. And that kind of is by its nature, kind of not forcing its way, but like the bank is going to break eventually. Like you can't tell these people not to care, or like force or point them in directions or divert them from expressing the things that are important to them forever. Eventually, one thing has got to give. Either the website itself falls apart and people leave and they treat it as something where perspectives aren't welcome, or the team kind of falls apart. So you have to give it some balance, and that's what I think a lot of places are trying to do. As much places that involve corporations, big teams, if you're a YouTuber or a streamer, you are technically the master of your own kind of destiny when it comes to that stuff. You use your own voice, and your considerations are like, how are my audience going to feel, how is my sponsors going to feel, or whatever. But when you work at a corporation or like on a team, you need to factor in like, is this going to hurt other people when I say it?
Yeah.
So it's a tricky balance, but I feel like it's getting more and more prevalent, people speaking out. And if the backlash is any indication, it's the severity, intensity of it is certainly proof that people are speaking up and other people are not liking it, the kind of more accepting and diverse messages that are out there.
As a lifelong gamer myself, I know that gamers are amongst the most oppressed people in the world, and part of that sometimes is I feel when we see very horrible things coming out of a gaming community, right? Like say Gamergate or other examples like that. Sometimes the hashtag not all gamers comes into mind or something like that. But like, how much do you think a lot of sometimes those very negative views of an entire community are based on the overwhelming amount of people who are actually contributing to it, or say one or two YouTubers who are just losing their mind over pronouns, and then getting a lot of people to get angry about it?
What I'll say is outright, I don't think that the kind of those people are representative of the gaming industry as a whole, or like the people who are actively engaged in games. I feel like the vast majority of people who play games and consider themselves gamers and like care about video games are pleasant and like chill people for the most part. I feel like the people who are, you know, the kind of more toxic element are the most vocal element. It's the same, with any sort of like uh I guess hobby community or like fan base or whatever. The loudest ones, the ones that get the most attention, are the ones that are the ones that are either most passionate or acting out the most noticeably. Like, it works on both sides of the spectrum. And I don't believe I can't, but I can't allow myself to believe that these are the people who represent gaming as a whole, because then it just means that like I have to really rethink about. And like the thing is, like, everyone that is around me, everyone that I speak to are friends, and I'm in situations where I can see the people that make games and see the people who play games and see certain discussions happening, and it's like, these are cool people, these are nice people. And yeah, I feel like the issue is the how that kind of disparity in how vocal people are intersects with the wider world, right? When there are these lightning rod situations where uh, people beyond our own communities are paying attention to what our community is doing because of some issue that has transcended just us and is mainstream now, there's gonna be, they're gonna look at the most obvious kind of signs of what a community is like. And again, the toxic ones are usually the most noticeable and loudest. So what can often happen is, like, you get these kind of like rogue elements, or these like people with ill intentions being given the most kind of exposure, which is a tricky part of it. And that's what creates this kind of identity around us as people who like video games as being toxic and anti, a lot of the issues that are out there.
There seems to be two different camps I'm seeing right now that are complaining about the state of the industry. And one of them seems to really be focused on the fact that video games are becoming too, quote, woke by trying to have more representation or more accessibility to players. And then the other side is saying that the industry is doing what a lot of industries do, which is activism. Blizzard, or they're merging, they're really making a lot of their workers work overtime to be able to meet the crunch and stuff like that. And obviously, everything from like loot boxes to pay to play structures, to all that kind of stuff. Do you think the industry is heading in a negative direction in that regard, or do you think that there is salvation in the form of, say, indie games or something like that?
No, I don't think it's going in a negative direction. I definitely think there are aspects of the industry that I feel are kind of destructive, or even anti-consumer in a lot of ways. Like the whole like microtransaction element of it, and the kind of nickel and diming people for aspects of games. And there's even like things such as lifestyle games, games as a service games, becoming the core focus for major companies that I have concerns about. The concerns are more severe for stuff like loot boxes and the gambling element of it, and kind of like monetization, and the dark patterns that are used to in game design to try and get more money out of people's pockets. That is like a more severe kind of response on my part. The other stuff, um it can be a little more like it's an evolution. Hopefully we get to a place that's better than this, when it comes to like representation and that kind of stuff, I feel like that's the best example that the industry is going in a good direction. Like it's going in a direction that feels more inclusive. It feels more like there's road now again. Remember, there was a period of time when every game was the same. Everyone would chase a trend.
Space Marine. It's just
Space
like white
Marines.
Space Marines, Marines in every character.
Gears came out, and then everyone was like, "Let's do over the shoulder," and that was everything. And nowadays, I feel like indie games have reached the point where they can't. I wouldn't say they go toe to toe with big budget games, but what I will say is like they are notable enough that they can present new ideas and have them take root and in really interesting ways, and have those kind of like the pipeline from indie developer with cool idea to that idea has been implemented in a major blockbuster video game is clearer than ever, and it's definitely there. And I feel like that's how I think of the industry in a lot of ways. Like I feel like I can't hand on my heart say we'll get to the point where the major corporations and developers and publishers that are doing the big budget games are gonna be super representative, even though those do definitely exist. Like Sony's one of them. They put out the Miles Morales game, and that is incredibly like inclusive, and it is like given some authenticity to it. So those exist, but I can't say there's going to be widely adopted. What I can say is like there's going to be indie developers that come in and keep pushing it, and I feel like we'll get to a point where it will start to be kind of like the lines between them is going to blur a bit, where you'll find these ideas make their way into some big indie games, to the degree where it becomes recognizable, and people who might feel alienated by big games before may feel less alienated.
I have never understood the argument from people who have played games like BioShock or Metal Gear Solid to try and say that video games are apolitical and they should be apolitical, which to me is just kind of wild. It's just kind of like, I think people just not understanding art, but that's becoming a really big thing right now, is politics and video games, and should they be separated? And how have you kind of navigated that world? Oh, everyone's gonna go wild. There's a cat on screen.
Yeah, there's a cat on screen.
Now the internet's losing their mind.
She's very loud. I love her, but she is like, she's a freak. She just had some food and now she wants to run. Yeah. Her name is Miko. She's named Mikolash, host of the Nightmare, after the Bloodborne character.
Oh, nice. So, hi, Mikolash.
Yeah, the politics side of it, it's hilarious to me. I feel like it's going to sound really condescending, and I both don't mean it to be, but I also mean it to be. If you're playing video games, sorry, not sorry. If you're playing video games and you play them and act like there's not political aspects of it in various facets, you are playing video games on the basest of levels. Like I'm not saying everyone needs to think about video games as complicated things, but to exclaim that there are no politics in the video games just tells me that you don't understand what these video games are about. You don't understand, or you're not seeing beyond the surface level. You know what I mean? Like every video game is political to some degree almost. Call of Duty might seem like to you like you're just shooting stuff, but they take place in the context of wars that are often either inspired by or drawing inspiration from, or like drawing like, historical context from real history, and in that way they are inherently political. Like we've had JFK in a Call of Duty game. We've had revisionist history of conflicts in the Middle East in Call of Duty games. Call of Duty is a political series, and then Metal Gear Solid is probably my favorite video game series of all time. And if you say there's no politics in video games in a world where Metal Gear Solid exists in video games, it is beyond moronic. And like whenever I see people be like, keep politics out of video games, I just ignore it, because I'm like, I hate to say this again, you're just outing yourself as a dum-dum. Like,
Have you
I don't
ever
really
seen
care.
those lists or those memes where it's like, thank God for apolitical video games, and Wolfenstein is in there? And I'm like,
My God, it's that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to be so oblivious. You either have to be intentionally doing that, like intentionally not recognizing it, and for your own, like, to preserve your own perspective,
Mhm.
or you're just like you just incapable of seeing beyond surface level. And like, take the most bro dude like game ever, like Gears of War. That
Mhm.
is a political game. Like,
Mhm.
there is, it's about, resources and the invasions and like a fight for survival of
AI and
humanity. And yeah, it's all kind of, it is, it has political themes in it. Sci-fi is inherently political as well. Like, I'd say the only games that are probably not political is like Mario Kart. But at some point, you
hey,
know,
carbon footprint, carbon
yeah,
footprints.
there's the carbon footprints, there's gold coins on these courses. What is capitalism doing to kart racing? That kind of stuff. Like, I don't know, like Street Fighter, maybe. I don't know. But like, inherently, like the games that you probably love are political, like
If
in
not
different
overtly,
ways,
yeah.
if not overtly, subtly,
Mhm.
and yeah. So I just find it a laughable insinuation. And again, like, I stop myself from engaging people by just reminding myself that they don't understand video games, like or
Mhm.
they have no willingness to look beyond the bare essentials of what they are and see the true value in video games. Because sometimes you may not agree with the message of a video game, especially one that's inherently political to a degree, but at least it broadens your perspective, and that in itself gives massive value to video games as a medium and an art form.
Speaking of political topics, I would say one of the most controversial ones, or if not the most controversial one to speak up about, happens to be what is happening right now, the Palestinians. And I wanted you to quickly explain kind of a call to action that you made to the video game industry and how it was received.
Yeah, so there's actually there's one that we did recently and one that I did previously. So the previous one was the last time there was aggression towards the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, a few years back. And um, I think, like, the reason I was in London at the time, which is where I grew up, and I'm currently based in San Francisco, which is where I live now, but in London at the time. And it was I was in the midst of a lot of social upheaval. It was around the time that there was advocacy and activism for against police brutality, and the Black Lives Matter movement, in its most earnest form, was kind of a big topic of discussion, and people rose to the occasion in a way that was really, really unexpected and fascinating. I mean, the political, kind of apparatus didn't kind of react to that in a meaningful way, and often a lot of it was dismissed. And as is the case with politics, things were twisted and used for different gains. But at the very least, there were like people speaking up about something that was important. And it had a knock-on effect, which was almost felt like a bit of a fever. And some of it was clearly clout chasing, but like, you get companies, major corporations, acting like showing support for some of these causes. And on the one hand, we're not stupid. We're not cynical. Like, maybe we are cynical. We're not stupid. We're not naive. We look at these companies and it's like, we know why, I don't know, Reebok is saying Black Lives Matter because they
Yeah.
want you to buy more Reebok
Yeah.
shoes. That's it, entirely it. But does that diminish the fact that a major platform has done that?
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't really do that. It doesn't. To me, it's like, I get it, but also like it, and you should call it out to a degree. Yeah, you say like, we know why you're doing this, but at the same time, there are probably people out there who might get some awareness out of it. So that was happening a lot, and there was a lot of like discussion around Black Lives Matter. It was everywhere, and not just Black Lives Matter as a group, but also the rights and the historical treatment of people of color in America and around the world, separate from the political aspect of a group, speaking up about it. It was a discussion that was happening, and it was really heartening to see it in a lot of ways. And then the stuff that happened in Palestine happened, and I was very disheartened to see like nothing. There was no response to it. Or if the response was there, it was coming from the same places that it had always been at the same volume that it always had been. And that was really disheartening to me, because for me personally, it was like, this is how it's always been, but the reaction was quite severe when it was juxtaposed against what just happened with Black Lives Matter. And my thinking was, or the thing that I told myself was like, I am 100% certain that the people who spoke up for Black Lives Matter would speak up for the Palestinian cause. There's just these roadblocks that are in the way that are preventing them from even engaging it. And the main roadblock for me is, and it always has been, people painting this conflict as complicated. It's complicated. And so that was kind of my message of the first video. It was like, it's not complicated. It is a subjugation of a people that has been happening for decades, the complete devaluation of their lives, the complete assumption of control of every aspect of their lives, the slow displacement of them, violence against them. This is what it is on paper. And it's coming from a nation state that has it has got funding from others around the world and is basically given express approval. And the kind of what I said was like, hey, if you cared about Black Lives Matter, why don't you care about this? Is it because like, your sponsors, are you worried about this? Are you worried about that? And I just encourage people to like really think about it from a human perspective. Why are you creating a distinction between the lives of this group and that group? And I was surprised in many, many ways to see that people kind of listened. And it was really heartening to see a lot of people be like, yeah, this is why I didn't talk about it. And there's an industrial complex around a very well-oiled machine about ensuring that people don't speak about the issues in Palestine, because it requires you to put Israel in a light where they are the aggressor, and anti-Semitism is a real issue, but it also can be wielded in a way that stifles these conversations. And I've seen it happen many, many times, and it's something that a lot of people don't want to tackle, and they don't want to get behind, and they don't want to kind of even think about. So that's been a major, major issue for a lot of people. And so that video, surprisingly, people spoke up and people were sharing it, and people were trying to do more research, and it got a lot of traction. There was a lot of money raised, and between smaller nobodies like me who are trying to raise money and big, content creators and streamers like Hussain and everyone else that got involved, there was a lot of money being raised in different corners of the internet, and it was really impressive. And then more recently, I was asked by a friend of mine, Chris, who works at a company and a YouTube channel called People Make Games, which is about kind of the human discussion around video games and finding investigative stories and really cool elements of the industry and the culture to explore. He messaged me and he was like, hey, do you want to say something and use our platform for speaking up again? And I decided to take it because, again, the same thing was happening. It was not a lot of discussion, not a lot of awareness around it. And the difficult thing was, this time I understood why it was happening, right? Last time I said it wasn't complicated. This time it is complicated, but the underlying issues remain the same. The complication comes from the objectionable, condemnable attacks from Hamas that killed thousands innocent Israeli people that did not deserve it. And again, I'm going to do the thing that everyone asks: do you condemn Hamas? Yes.
Well,
okay.
I'm glad, because I was going to have to ask that next. That was my next question, but you saved me some time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, anyone who's got two brain cells condemns it, and is actively aware of how that is a detriment to the ongoing Palestinian effort for like liberation and freedom. But at the same time, that video was more like, I get it, it's rough, but you have to understand that this did not happen in a vacuum. Like, there are factors that beyond simple, and that's the issue that we have with this latest kind of instance of it happening. no one no one looks past the last 3-4 weeks or whatever it is. They think everything was perfect up until that point, and
History
then
began on
unprovoked.
October 7th.
Yes,
Basically.
exactly. History began on October 7th, and that's when it happened. No one really, and a lot of the discussions, a lot of the people who are in my mentions calling me a terrorist and saying like, this is because this happened, this is because this happened. It's like, I just don't engage them because I can tell they have no understanding and they're not willing to understand it, and they're not doing this in good faith. There is a inherent like maliciousness to the way they approach this conversation that stems from the fact that they won't look beyond October 7th, which on that day, again, something horrible happened. But before that, something horrible has been happening for 70 years. And why is it okay for that to happen up until that point? And now you pay attention, and every moral fiber of your body, every being causes you to object to what happened that day. Again, it's a simple case of evaluation of lives higher than others. Like the people in one spot are more important to you than people than or in the other. And that was my main thing. It was like, I understand that it's tricky, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. These are a nation of 2 million people that have had land taken from them, are exposed to daily colonialism and settler violence. They barely have food and water. They are living in an apartheid state, in a what is effectively an open air prison. A lot of people call it an open air prison because, and I've seen the discussion that people don't even call it a prison because the prison implies that some element of justice has taken its course, and they are there because they are wrong. I'm one of those people who's like, I don't feel great about calling it a prison because you characterize everyone within there as a wrongdoer, as someone who's been deemed as a criminal. And but that is effectively what it is. It is an open air prison for a lot of people, and it's just like, that is what you need to remember. That happened before this. This is an act of desperation in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of other political factors that come into play. But I wanted to focus on the retaliation, to look back at it. Does what happened that day justify the killing of 10,000 plus people now? Is that okay with you? Is it okay for them to say, we're doing this as self-defense? Is it okay for the radical right-wing government of Israel? Again, I don't fault the people. The people of Israel are not to blame for this for me. Like, I don't want to go in there. I don't want to seem like I'm a person who's like, all Israeli people are bad. No, that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that right now, the government in charge of it is bloodthirsty and maniacal. And if you look into the history of the individual people that make up that government, it is a pattern. It's a history. It's there for you to see. And they are no longer hiding it. They are being very open, plain about what they're doing. They are actively ignoring internationally recognized human rights groups that are saying this is an apartheid state. This is heinous crime. They are in that position of privilege where they can do that. Yeah, and it's just a case of like, that is the thing that I want it to impress upon them. Like, this is a situation that a government is like taking every opportunity to drive home a goal of completely eradicating, ethnically cleansing a group of people and removing them from that space, their land, so that they can assume complete control under the guise of self-defense, under the guise of, is it okay for people to say, oh, Hamas is using human shields? Is it okay when someone says that human shields are there? Is it okay to just bomb the entire building then? Is that how it works? Like,
the strategy doesn't seem to work. Yeah.
It doesn't seem to work.
If that was the case.
Not only is it a stupid line of reasoning, like, there are innocent people in there, they're being used as human shields, let's just blow the entire building up. Does that save the innocents, or does that just kill everyone? Because I'm pretty sure it's the second one. And then the other side of it is, this is the strategy that has been employed by the Israeli government for years. At what point do people go, oh, this has been happening for years and it's done nothing? Like, maybe we should try something else. Like, it is not even thought of as a possible solution. There's a feverish level of like rage and bloodthirstiness that currently exists that has kind of spread to every corner of the world, where you have politicians that seemed like they might be level-headed to a degree, actively calling for a genocide, and like people
Oh,
who are
did you see the rally today?
no, what's that?
There's a big rally taking place in D.C. where a bunch of like Democrats and Republicans, including Mike Johnson and I think Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, they're all chanting no ceasefire, and saying that a ceasefire call would be ridiculous. And it's at this point it's mind-boggling. You know, I'm like, is anyone going to give us a number? Is there going to be a number? You know,
that is it. Think about what the term no ceasefire means. Like beyond just the kind of it means no ceasefire means please continue killing people. Please continue killing innocent people. Like we demand blood. We demand sacrifices. We need bodies. Like that is the opposite of a ceasefire. A ceasefire is people asking for a ceasefire are just saying stop killing people. Please, it's enough. And like you said, what is the upper limit? And according to Biden, there is none. But like that is all people are asking for, and that's what my video was about. Like we reached a stage now where the toll it has taken on both sides is awful. On one side, the Palestinian side, it is a level of relentless and horrendous that I think about it, and it like it makes me have an existential crisis every time it happens. And it's like how do you have any kind of faith in the world in this day and age when this is the thing that's happening, you know? And how do you see people defending it and go on thinking, you know, these are the people who are should be in charge. These are the people who deserve to be in charge. Like these are the people making the right decisions for us and the world.
I think even worse is moralizing it, trying to be like, well, this is an act of self-defense, or that this is tactical in order to remove a terrorist threat. And I'm like, bombing hospitals, children's schools, refugee camps, you can't tell me that's not going to create radicalization. That's not going to create more hatred. How can anyone stand by and witness that and then suddenly think this is a solution to a problem that we've been doing the same thing for so many years, and it just gets worse and worse and worse.
And I think it kind of plays into the other big kind of message or point that I made in both of the videos that I did is like the world is trained to see the lives of Middle Eastern, brown people, South Asians, people from that region as completely disposable. Like they hold no value to anyone. And I don't know if you've seen that supercut of when people were talking about the Ukraine kind of issue versus now, where people are like, these are innocent white people. These are Europeans. Like as if, you know, to say like those people don't matter because they're barbaric monsters who aren't white. But like that approach is what I see everywhere now, where people are very not excited, but like keen to throw their support behind one group, but will not even mention the other because it's like they're not even worth mentioning, you know? And that's a huge issue because we have been trained and conditioned to see no value in them. We have trained and been conditioned to never look at Gaza, a place that has even a small amount of beauty in it. Like you never see Gaza as a nice setting in Gaza or any other part. You just constantly see this bombed out gray version of it, and like people just say, oh, that place exists just for war, and the people there are just they're no different from video game NPCs, where they do stuff and they get killed, and then we move on, and then some of them will respawn and we'll carry on again later. That's all they are, and that's what our movies treat us to train us to treat them as. At some point, the brown person is going to betray you, and the comics we read treat us
or be a terrorist by default, or
exactly. That's all that we are trained to believe in the Western world, and in a lot of ways, that's why I think it's important, bringing it back to video games, to have these voices. The only people that are going to try and put a crack in that kind of status quo are the people who have been affected by it, people who understand it, the people who have the most to gain in a way by tearing down those stereotypes, or at least creating enough cracks in them so that other people can see through and see that maybe there's something wrong here, or maybe there's another way to think about these people. And it's like crucial to not just video games, but to all art and and entertainment mediums that kind of diversity of perspective is brought there. Obviously, the tricky part is, like, in the second video I did for People Make Games, we had a developer on from who is living in the West Bank, and the hard part for him is he makes games, but it's so difficult to have them published. No one will support him with money for the project. Two, he struggles to even get published. In that video, we talk about a game that he made called Layla, which is just about a girl surviving the war, and that was kept off the Apple Store because of its political message. But at the same time, you could download and play a game where you play as an Israeli missile on the Apple Store. So it's like, what is the propagation of art and messages from Palestine is like kept out of media and entertainment in a way as well. And I bet there's people who don't even think about the idea of game developers being in Palestine. It's not something you even consider as feasible from people in Palestine, because all you've seen is them emaciated, killed, dying. You don't think these are people with thoughts, feelings, creativity, and abilities. You just don't expect it. So people don't look at art that comes from there or seek it out, but it's there. It's there. It's impactful. It's valuable. And my hope was people support the art that comes out of there as well as trying to listen to the message about speaking up for Palestine. Also support people who are from there, and they are currently mostly small parts of major teams. You would be surprised at how many people from Palestine are making games that are working on games that are huge and you play every day. We just need to get into a position where the people who make those games can put their message out in the way that they want it to, and give you a broader and deeper understanding of what's happening in the world.
I think that goes back to your earlier point, and I think is a really, really important one. It plays into the dehumanization of Palestinians, because if you start to think of them as artists capable of producing beautiful things, then it's a lot harder to justify carpet bombing them.
Yeah, exactly. Like that dehumanization is so effective because it relies on, and it is a core part of the Israeli marketing campaign against it. Like, it is important to make sure that people don't see Palestinians as people. They can only be seen as Hamas. That is it, nothing else. They are brown people with bombs strapped to them. They hide in tunnels with missiles. That's all they are, nothing more. There's nothing, there's no attempt beyond that to show them as anything else. So why would the world care if these kind of fodder is being taken out? That's important. And the dehumanization and the humanization comes from normal things that we don't get to see them do. You don't get to see a Palestinian family together. You don't get to see them sit down and cook a meal together unless you're watching I don't know, like an Anthony Bourdain documentary or something like that. You don't get to see them play in the streets. You don't get to see them watch a movie. You don't get to see them, be excited about music or anything like that. They are not human in the wider world. They are just targets. That is it. And it's like so devastating and you can, if you look around and try and pay attention to how these people are engaged with and treated, you can definitely see the kind of underhandedness to it. It's out there. Whether it's watching a movie like American Sniper, which is like, it's just a movie about killing brown people. Like,
true.
At the end of the day, like, it is just a movie about
glorifying
glorified. This dude's a hero because look how he killed these brown people. Isn't it amazing?
But he did avoid killing a kid in one scene, so he's
actually, that one. Good for him. He did it. Well done. Well done.
Fucking bare minimum.
Yeah, and it's that kind of stuff. It's like, if you think about the Call of Duty set piece where you've mowed down 300 brown people with not much of a reason other than we need to get in there and get this piece of intel. Like, if you really think about that, you can at least identify that it's you didn't think about it. You were conditioned. You just did it. You don't hold any narrative value to it. You just needed to be told, point your gun that way and do it. And it's a reason why I've really struggled with playing Call of Duty lately. Like, I used to, I, like everyone, loved Modern Warfare. I loved Modern Warfare 2. And then, I played the Black Ops games. I was a Call of Duty person. I've grown up playing Counter-Strike my entire life. And you reach a point where you're like, how long can I keep seeing people that look like me being murdered ruthlessly with numbers popping up out of them before it starts to have an impact on me? Because I definitely reached that point. Like, I was well beyond it. And it's even worse when you try and find examples of people that look or sound like you that aren't doing that, because they barely exist. One of my favorite characters in video games is Zaid Masani from Mass Effect. He's got an Middle Eastern Arab name, and he looks brown. That dude is a maniacal loose cannon of a human being who just blows shit up. But like, I'm like, I'll take it. I'll take it. I can at least think about him in a different way. But Zaid is in a lot of ways not a good dude. But I mean, like, he's cool for sure. But like, I would love it if like the main character of an actual hero was a brown person. And we have some of that. We have the Assassin's Creed games are particularly kind of focused on showing cultures, and we had Altair and more recently we had Basim, who are the stars of those characters. But again, like, there's not a lot of it. Those are the exceptions to the rules, and the lack of being able to be enthused and being reinforced about characters and lifestyles and my culture in media, in comparison to seeing how we're actually treated, it has an impact for sure. And it's important that games try and change that.
That's so fucked up, and I think that's something that, like, people like myself don't even think about. Because I remember when I was interviewing Mega Ran, I asked why does he always create all these 2D NES characters and turn them black, and he's like, because I never saw myself in the Nintendo Entertainment System. I never was Mega Man. I never was the hero. I never was Mario, right? Like, I didn't grow up with that.
The only character I could identify with growing up was Dalsim from Street Fighter 2. And purely because he was brown. Like, he wasn't from Pakistan, where I'm from, where I was born. He wasn't Muslim, which is what I am. He was just brown. And he was a stretchy brown man who could do fire stuff. And that was all I had for the longest time. And it is devastating. And I always see like the pushback to people, that comes from people whenever they see a character who's like not the typical. If they see a brown character, they're like, woke. This is woke. Bullshit is woke. Or even a black character, like, the one of the two protagonists of Alan Wake 2 is a person of color, like black female character, Saga Anderson. Immediately during the announcement, the moment that came out, people were just like, this game's woke, I'm not buying it. It's like, how can the existence of a person that doesn't look like you be such a threat to you that this is how you want to act? Again, some of us are like doing it. Some people are doing it maliciously on purpose. Or it's also, you have to kind of accept that the world and we are conditioned to react in that way. And the good people will catch themselves and really think about, why did I say that? Why did I behave like that? Why did I try and tear someone else down from being able to enjoy this piece of media? Was it for a valid reason or an invalid reason? And if it's purely because that person doesn't look like you, or doesn't have your exact perspective on life, or even is presenting a perspective, as the people who say like keep politics out of games would say, if it's that, then you should probably rethink what you're doing.
How do we change that outside of getting more people of color in the industry to be able to actually, write characters that happen to be diverse? Like,
yeah, I think like the one is exactly what you said, like being able to have people who have those perspectives involved in some way. I know for a fact that a lot of situations where characters in video games now are coming from from a diverse background are there, but they're still not written with authenticity. There's not a lot of work done to bring in someone to speak to that. It's mostly that same team who may not be a good representation of who that person is, just trying to write for that voice. I don't know very many games out there that are like have a character that is like, I don't know, brown, Pakistani, maybe an Arab, that is also written by that, and or there's some element of like, we've brought in an expert. They definitely exist. I know it's pretty big for on the Ubisoft side, but like that's a key part of it. Like the opening the door to allow people who have those life experience to guide you to some degree. Not to, if you know, it doesn't have to be you have to let these people write it. At least let them help you kind of represent that character in the way that you want them to be represented.
Authentically.
Chances are, yeah, authentically. Chances are you're putting them in there out of a kind of like good intention. Just allow those people to come in and help you deliver on that instead of just trying to wing it and potentially having a 50-50 split. It could go well, but it could also go bad. And if it goes bad, is it going to be, are you going to feel good about that? Probably not, when you could have, you know, spoken to someone who could have helped you out. So I think that's one way of letting, of improving that. And the other stuff is just, we have to kind of speak up a little more for games and media that is coming from these people and isn't traditional. Again, it's another one of those things where it's like you have to do a little bit of work. You have to find these games, you have to play these games, you have to vouch for them, and also like you have to be comfortable being able to speak about the fact that it is, the unique aspect of it is that it comes from a black perspective, it comes from a brown perspective. That is like an identifier that often people will try and push aside when they are recommending these diverse games. It'll be like, oh, here's a game, this is about the South Asian cooking culture, but this is about cooking, for example. They'll usually be like, this is about Indian cooking culture, instead of just being like, this is a cooking game. You know what I mean? And it's just like, you need to normalize having those aspects of games and media and entertainment in the mix, and not try and shy away from it and try and like half-heartedly present stuff. Like you need to, again, be proud of, or like if you want to recommend something, talk about why you're recommending it. If it's a thing that, you know, it's because it's from a diverse voice or wherever it may be.
I noticed in the last really bad bombing campaign by Israel that a couple major magazines involved in video games, IGN specifically, ended up making a post initially, supporting or expressing some support as safely as they could for the Palestinian cause, and then they had to take that page down. It was pretty quick when it was up and down, and they kind of reversed their course on it. Do you think that has changed? Is it safer now for a lot of these major publications to perhaps speak out, or at least say that we do not support, ethnic cleansing or something to that effect?
No, I don't believe it is. I would love to sugarcoat it and say yes, but that would create a false sense of optimism, and it will create a scenario where people believe progress is being made when it isn't. I can't speak to the IGN situation. It's not my place to say. I can tell you that largely in the video game industry, there's always pushback to that stuff. It's very rare that it always usually is the people, the people who have a vested interest in it are the people who make up the kind of the core of those publications, websites, and teams. They're the people who are waking up every day, writing the news stories, playing the games, trying to present you with podcasts, whatever, the content creator part of it. The people who are like grinding it out every day, those are the people who are usually most empowered to do something. It's the corporate element above that usually stifles it. And sadly, that corporate element, it still is the overwhelming power in these dynamics. There's not much you can do against it. I also want to kind of impress upon people that every time you see it happen, it comes with great risk. Like it is the people that are doing this in that situation. The reason it might not have been up for very long, but I was proud of my friends at IGN. I was proud of my peers at IGN that they did it, even if it was just for a minute. I know what that would have taken, and I know what the risk they took. And sure, it went down. I can't I can't pretend to know why it went down, but I know that it was worth it. And those people who work to make that happen should be proud. Every time we talk about these things, whether it's, you know, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, the way transgender people are treated, Israel, Palestine, whatever it may be, it is a huge, huge risk. And there is almost always multiple people trying to stop it from happening. So when you see it, it's worth, I don't know, supporting, like drawing attention to it, because chances are it's going to not be there for very long and someone's probably going to get in trouble for it. So I don't think it's changing for the better. I don't think I could say it's better until it's safe. When someone can do it without telling themselves, I might lose my job for this, that's when it's better because it's safe.
One of the last things I want to ask you, just slightly connected but a little off topic, is recently the entire video team of The Escapist all quit together because I believe the head of their video department was fired, and then everyone in solidarity also left. All the content producers in a way I've never seen before. I've never seen that kind of solidarity amongst so many people who work in entertainment related to video games. Is that a sign of anything in that people are in these conditions? Not, they're going to stand behind someone willing to actually go forward like that.
I think it's a sign of people in the workforce starting to understand the value they have. It's something that obviously it is a core part of the discussion around unionization, but a key part of capitalism corporate structure is ensuring that the rank and file never figure out that they are the heart, the engine, and the most important part of the business they are part of. I think that slowly over time, whether it's through unions in other sectors, video games is having a somewhat of a kind of building somewhat of a momentum around unionization. Some of it is like intersects with other kind of industries. Like I'm sure the writers part of it is going to have an impact and has had an impact on the video game writers aspect of it. Voice acting and acting there's no difference between it. So there's kind of like and I know that people in the video game industry who are performers, they behaved in a way to support the strikes that happened recently around actors and that kind of stuff. So there's a commonality between them. And I think seeing that happening, people are starting to really understand that they have power more than they realize. I also think that there's a lot of overreach happening in the corporate world where people are, for want of a better phrase, taking the piss. It is a value or a level of like assuming that people won't kind of cotton on to how you feel, how you're treating them, that as like really overstepping. Like we can't, in a scenario, for example, where you create a work environment where women are treated very poorly, like if you're not doing something about that in this day and age, people are more empowered to speak up about it and do something about it. It's still not nearly enough, and often the results won't meaningfully change things right now, but there's enough of that happening where people are starting to realize, oh, I can make an impact, I can do something, I don't have to take this anymore. Whether it's because they believe that they're better off without, or whether it's just because they see more value in themselves as a person, it's definitely happening. I can't speak to the intricacies of what happened at The Escapist, but it feels like they looked at it and were like, this sucks. And we don't have to stand for this bullshit, and we're going to do what we do, and bounced. And there's a lot of video game websites where that is happening, where people are being treated not being treated according to the value that they have, and they're realizing I'll go somewhere else and create that value for myself instead of for you, and it's more viable than ever.
And it's like you said, I think the more people speak out about any one topic, the safer it is for everyone to speak about it.
Exactly. Like you don't want to be the single voice. You want to say something knowing that there are other people who will stand by you and will support you in this. And there is a lot of that in the video game industry. If that's the one thing I can say for sure is like there's a lot of people who just need, who will stand up for you. They just need to be, given the opportunity in a lot of ways.
Last question being asked by a lot of people in chat. Top 5 games.
Of all time?
Or you can just give number 1. You can give your favorite if 5 is hard. I know ordering them is really tricky.
I change this from day to day. I can give you 5, but these are the games that these are the games I probably think about the most or have had the most impact on me. Bloodborne, I think that's probably one of the main ones. Yeah, Metal Gear Solid. Do I have to pick one? That's hard. If I had to pick one I think Metal Gear Solid is probably the one that really like changed. That was the game that made me take video games more seriously as a medium, and also it made me realize that I wanted to be in and amongst it, and that was the moment that it became intrinsically linked to video games in terms of my identity, my interests, and everything. That was the game that made me go, I want to analyze this and figure this out, and why do I love this thing so much? So I think Metal Gear Solid 1 is definitely one of them. So Bloodborne, Metal Gear Solid 1, Super Metroid is probably another one that I think is incredible. Just the atmosphere of that game is untouched. Still one of the greatest games of all time. I have to say Mass Effect. It's my favorite sci-fi kind of universe. It's gotta be 2. I'm not one of those people who thinks 3 sucks. I think 3 is a fantastic game. But I feel like 2 is the one where I really could not stop thinking about it. Mass Effect 2 is pretty incredible. And then I think I would need to put a Street Fighter game in there just because I am that person who's like very competitive at times and love fighting games. If I had to pick one, it would probably be Third Strike.
Oh, interesting. I love Third Strike. Yeah. I had that on Dreamcast.
It's really good. I think I played the Alpha series is what I played the most, Zero series, but the one that really like got its claws in me and made me take it more seriously was Third Strike. Yeah,
that's amazing. Tamoor, where can people find you? Social medias, plug them.
You can find me on the hellscape that is Twitter at Tamoor H. I also stream on Twitch at I'm Tamoor H on there. I haven't streamed for a while, but it's mainly because 1, I moved house recently. 2, right now it's best for me not to make myself super accessible on the internet, if you know what I mean. So yeah, fair enough. I'm like kind of being very careful about that. But I do stream. I stream a lot. I used to anyway. I love streaming, so I'll be hopefully back soon. Yeah, and then I'm on Instagram and I'm at Tamoor H everywhere. So yeah, please do come and say hi. It would be nice to have a few more like-minded people knocking about.
Yeah, Tamoor, thank you so much. I deeply appreciate this interview. It was amazing talking to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for doing what you do. I watch the show fairly regularly. I'm a lurker. I do that everywhere. But like I have learned a lot and gained a lot of really interesting and valuable perspectives from watching you and the podcast that you guys do and stuff like that. So keep it up. Well done.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
it.
Have a good day,
folks.
Bye. Everybody, twitter.com says TAMOORH. Go right now if you are using Twitter, obviously. If you don't want to use and he's completely correct, the hellscape that is Twitter, then go find him on Instagrams or other social media sites that aren't dominated by weirdos. Yeah, that was incredible, and a really, really cool conversation. I couldn't agree more with the point of it's really scary to be the only person talking about things sometimes, because I remember maybe like I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago, I was starting to really want to bring on land defenders, indigenous sovereignty, land back advocates, and interview them and talk about them. And I would either like no one would want to see those episodes or watch them or even like spend any time with them. People were like popping off about how like, just the worst kind of racists going off about how like, oh, blah, blah, blah. These people are just like parasites on the tax system and they're all alcoholics and all that kind of shit. And that culture really changed the more other people started speaking out about it, and the more other people started doing videos on it, suddenly it wasn't like, you know, a topic that you know, people wanted to look away from. And I think the same thing applies to like to everything, you know. One of the reasons why you know, I thought it was so powerful when I did see that IGN article pop up, and then, you know, it was taken down shortly afterwards. I was like, that's wild. I've read IGN my entire life. I never thought I would see a Palestinian flag on this website. And then obviously, you know, it's still a topic that is just far too difficult for corporate structure to want to, you know, take seriously sometimes. But yeah, amazing interview. I'll put it up on podcasts. I'll put it up on the Surf Times as well. If you missed any part of it, I'm just going to quickly grab water, and then we'll move on with the rest of the regularly scheduled show, which is just going to be nothing but uplifting stories and vibes all day.
Stop a corporation from spending that money on their own. Important note, this wasn't a Supreme Court ruling. It never reached the Supreme Court because the Attorney General didn't think it would be important. So, if you set up a political action committee, but it doesn't coordinate with any campaign, any candidate, people can donate as much as they want. Those PACs are called super PACs. Try to pause here and figure out how you'd bribe a politician with these tools. Because now it's easy. All you need to do is promise that politician you'll donate $100,000, maybe $1 million. Just not to them. You'll donate it to the super PAC that's running ads to advocate for them. All they have to do in exchange is give you a favor once they're elected. You know, something for something. And because the courts have declared that this could never, ever possibly cause corruption, you're in the clear. That is how our elections function, and have been since 2010. Now, to any normal person, that's a clear mistake. Because that's corruption, what we've been doing is corruption. It's bribery. It's what the law intends to prevent. There's no functional difference if the money you donate is going to a PAC or to the campaign. As long as it helps the candidate, you can use that to influence them. Quid pro quo. It's a clear oversight. This is why most of the spending on modern campaigns doesn't come from the campaigns anymore. It comes from super PACs. Super PACs funded by the rich to buy politicians. The solution is putting those donation limits back, and they can be, once the Supreme Court overrules the court that declared these limits unconstitutional. But until that mistake is fixed, this is your up-to-date guide on how to bribe a politician.
Good job, Austinox. Everybody, go subscribe to Austinox if you haven't already. I learned many things. Thanks for your great work. Do the comments and you know, help bump them up in the old algorithm and stuff like that. So there you are.
Clean up your room.
That's why I hate money in politics. Yeah, that as well. Oh, Man Cramps, thank you so much for the subscription with the message. Thanks, Lance. No, thank you. And SS Cat, thank you very much. Or Scat, thank you very much for resubscribing. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And for anyone who's tuning in, if you want to rewind the VOD, you can see the incredible interview I just did with Tamoor Hussain. It was absolutely awesome. Really, really intelligent guy. Nothing he says represents the views of Gamespot in any way, shape, or form. All his opinions were his own, to re-stress again. But I do want to reiterate one part, and this is something that was brought up also, you know, when speaking to Megaran, that really resonated with me. When you've got people who are flipping out about wokeness or fucking pronouns or all that kind of shit, and they're getting really, really upset about it because, oh my god, there happens to be a black stormtrooper or a woman who's a Jedi and shit like that, and like, oh, what woke, all that kind of stuff. Talk to some of your friends who grew up as kids, you know, either in the 90s, or maybe even you have friends who grew up as kids in the 80s, or maybe even the 70s, right? Talk to people of color and what it was like watching movies back then. Because I can tell you from every conversation I've ever had, you didn't think about this if you were white, like myself, that you never saw yourself on screen. In any way. You never saw yourself as the hero. You saw yourself as the terrorist. You saw yourself as the comical side guy. Even if you were gay, you were the comic relief, right? It would always just be that person who would show up and like, oh, I'm here, you know, all that kind of stuff, and then be like, oh, that's going to be the funny character because they talk different than I do, so that makes them funny, and they're going to be funny and silly right now. there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeing people represented on screen. I've always pushed back against that because that's what so many of the chuds, they always melt down to that kind of stuff. Pronouns, fucking pronouns, and it's like, yeah, wild, isn't it? The English language, how you've been using it your whole life. And now you gotta keep using it in the same way. You don't have to learn anything new whatsoever, But yeah, keep on struggling with that. So how about that? I had a friend that works for Gearbox, and they hosted Borderlands 3, massive cut to their expected bonus, really just in fan time about the industry. He's also a percent color developer. Lost, good to see you. Twitch.tv/Lost, SIOUX. Only white people were seen. It's true. And even, I have an indigenous mom who would always, try to say things like, oh, I really wish there would be more native people in movies and stuff like that, because we're always just seen as like savages. We're always just seen as kind of like barbarians that have to be tamed or brought to heel by, the civilized white people in the movies, and some of those movies, I mean, the civilized white people are just drunk cowboys running around shooting buffaloes and stuff like that. I guess kind of historically accurate. But she's like, it does mean a lot to her now to be able to watch movies where the stars happen to be native. The stars happen to be actually indigenous, not simply, a white person playing a native person. And that is important. It is important to people to want to see themselves on screen. And, the same thing Mega Ran was saying. When I asked him, I should have just assumed the answer, but it's like, because I never got to play as myself as Mega Man. I wasn't Mega Man. I wasn't Simon in Castlevania. I wasn't Super Mario. I wasn't Samus in Metroid. And so that's why I do that, because I do also want to play as myself. And by the way, before I get all the calls, that's white erasure. You can't do that. You're taking away all our characters. Invent your own. ¿Por qué no los dos? Why not have it all? Why don't we have a game with a black Mega Man, and then there's also like 27 white Mega Men for you to choose from? Just no shortage of white Mega Men. Or the same thing with Spider-Man. When people are like, there's Miles Morales, there's a black Spider-Man and an alternate. It's like, yes, but guess what? There's a lot of white Spider-Man too for you to have and enjoy. So why not have some other Spider-Man, maybe even some other Batman or Superman? It's like, no, Superman's an alien from another planet where only white people exist. I guess Krypton is a ethno planet, right? Krypton is a hard ethno planet where every single person is white. Yeah. We really can't expand our creativity, even when it comes to science fiction. Yes, Samus is a woman. Samus is a woman, canonically, I would say. I think Miss Pac-Man, no, I think Samus predates Miss Pac-Man. The very first example of a playable female character is actually a video game that's like a Pac-Man clone where you're a ladybug, and you play a ladybug who, like, it's a very simple, like, arcade game, but that was, I think, the first playable female character. And then obviously Miss Pac-Man, if people know historically, was a bunch of people, a team, I think they were university students, who basically modded an arcade board for Pac-Man because they wanted to make it harder. So they made the game you see behind you, the arcade game, Miss Pac-Man, is just a much harder version of that. And if you're asking Lance, are you good at Miss Pac-Man? Not really. You know who is? My partner. She's got the high score on that board. I think she's almost about to hit 100,000, which may not sound like a lot to actual collectionists or like Pac-Man players, but like that is a really hard thing to do. You got to get like flawless first like couple boards, collect everything, collect all the fucking fruits and everything. I just if I die once, I'm like, fuck this. And just turn it off, Yeah, usually while I'm editing, she's behind me playing Pac-Man. All right, let's cover some news. Oh yeah.
As I just said, of course, that highly anticipated meeting is coming up between President Biden and China's President Xi. That'll be on Wednesday at the so-called APEC summit. It'll be in San Francisco. Our next guest says, quote, all issues are now on the table. Let's bring in Jeff Moon, former assistant U.S. trade rep for China and China Moon Strategies founder and president. Jeff, always appreciate your joining us, sort of take us through. So why do you say, and what does that mean when you say all issues are on the table?
Well, the story of this summit really goes back to August of 2022 when Nancy Pelosi
Speaking of leftist audio,
visited Taiwan. China cut off most
sacrificial
diplomatic
melt.
and
Thank you.
contacts.
Love you. Another anniversary.
And
Hell yeah.
in November of that year, the presidents agreed they would take steps to restore the relationship. So that was what the series of visits.
Wow. Dave of the Serfs just sent me this. Twitter is putting hateful conduct labels on for cis hate, but not for trans hate. So this account tweets, "I hate trans people. This is a test," and then tweets, "I hate cis people. This is a test. Visibility limited. This post may violate X rules against hateful conduct." Fucking sissy snowflakes. Like, I don't know if that's an actual indication of a mass effect, if you will, but that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, how sensitive are all of you that a descriptive term that is not a slur or an insult is just how you were born? Like, it's like, I am not cis. I refuse.
Earlier this year was all about, and that was all designed to culminate in this summit this week and to restore relations. And so you hear in the news that they are talking about the full range, a number of things they weren't willing to talk about before: military to military relations, climate, maybe fentanyl, talking about AI. So we are talking about a much broader range of issues, and this cycle that China has gone through to...
Did you send us all the fentanyl? No, we didn't. So what does that mean?
Punish the U.S. for the Pelosi visit is now coming to a conclusion.
No, I didn't.
And hopefully we can get back to serious business. And there's no time to lose. There's a lot that's happening in the world.
This was a prominent speaker at the rally today, because I was going to cover the rally in a bit. I just learned that John Hagee, noted anti-Semite, Muslim hater, and racist, is a prominent speaking role at today's March for Israel rally. U.S. pastor apologizes to Jews for God sent Hitler comments. Controversial televangelist John Hagee issues apology, which was welcomed by ADL chief. Wow. God sent Hitler, eh? That's what we call fucked.
That requires the attention of both countries.
Yeah, there is an awful lot. You know, it's funny, we were covering Singles Day in China, and I was thinking, I was there 9 years ago in Shanghai, and how it was, you know, the relationship between the two countries, China's economy, you know, things are so different now, but you seem to believe that they've hit bottom. I'm not talking about their economy. I'm talking about relations between China and the U.S. What? You do believe that sort of things can actually get better? Because all they've done in the last 9 years, it feels like.
Holy shit, the copium.
Since I was there, is get worse.
Yeah, well, we really are at a low. What I was really saying was over the past year or so, we've seen the pattern of coercion and retaliation that China exerts when it's displeased. You know, it cuts off either some kind of political or economic benefit.
By the way, the reason I laugh at that is because at the end of the day, I'm not someone who actually gets off till line goes up, but, you know, American capitalists are. And so every single time they talk about China, I'm surprised they aren't praising the fucking capitalistic success of that country, but rather always shitting all upon it. But it's like, well, yeah, they're crushing it in terms of that. They're printing more billionaires than any other country right now.
It tries to blame the other side. It tries to elicit sincerity in the form of concessions, and then eventually they restore the relationship. So that's what's happening right now. It just so happens the same thing is happening with Australia on a different range of issues. So what's going to happen at this summit?
I just noticed I typed Bowden instead of Biden, and no one even corrected me. No one cares. Like, sure, Bowden, he sucks. You said it? Oh, okay. You made jokes for the record. Yeah, well, it was intentional, right? I did that. I don't know if you know, Scotiabank is one of the 4 biggest banks in Canada, and of the 4, it is the biggest investor into the military-industrial complex, including a lot of weapons and arms manufacturers who ship off weapons and arms that are being used to kill Palestinian children right now. Now, if you are wondering, oh no, am I part of one of the bad ones? If you're part of Scotiabank or Royal Bank, unfortunately the answer is yes. Scotiabank and Royal Bank are incredibly bad. Royal Bank also for just investing in a whole bunch of energy companies in Canada that infringe on Indigenous sovereignty, including the Wet'suwet'en people up north in northern British Columbia and their sovereign land. So if you want to divest from this kind of stuff, better time than ever. Now, if you're wondering, but then I want all those things. I like having the online banking. I like having the card. I like being able to use my phone as a payment system. You don't have to worry about all that. You can join, and hear me out on this one now. You can join one of the alternatives to banks. Now in Canada, I'm not sponsored, by the way, I'm not sponsored by any credit union, but I'm just going to say, do some research. Credit unions are collectively owned by everyone who puts money into the credit union. All right. They're like the worker cooperative structure of banks. Now there are shitty ones who will not allow for, public voting on who manages them. Whereas there are good ones. And if you do the research, you can find good ones that allow you to vote every single year on who you want to run the company, who you want to have, and what you want to invest in, which is the most important part. Because again, when you pool a whole bunch of money together, that money usually gets reinvested. Do you want to reinvest in projects that help the community, on social housing, on stuff like that? Or do you want to reinvest in the military industrial complex like Scotiabank does and puts a lot of money into it? And people are disrupting banks right now for this reason. Things like this. Pro-Palestine protesters twice interrupted the ceremony for prestigious Canadian Literacy Award. The event for the $100,000 Scotiabank Giller Prize was disrupted. It said Scotiabank funds genocide. And obviously, when you watch the footage of it, it's a lot of boos. A lot of people like, boo, how dare you interrupt us?
Okay.
Scotiabank currently has a $500 million stake in Outlet Systems. Outlet Systems is supplying the Israeli military's genocide.
Hey, Paradigm Shift. Everyone check out Paradigm Shift's channel. I'll check it out. I'll add it to a list of stuff I gotta look at. Yeah, Paradigm Shift is based. Go check out his channel. They got played out. They got fucking played out. They started playing fucking music over them. And if you listen to it right before, you can hear the people in the audience going like, boo.
Against the Palestinian people. We will not be silent anymore.
Get out of here. This is a $500 a plate table. You're not allowed to do that. Alright, content warning. Mass grave inside encircled Gaza hospital. So, for a while now, if you follow Doctors Without Borders or a lot of the other organizations that are doing critical work right now in the Gaza Strip, or at least were, a lot of them have either had to leave for their own safety, have died, or are currently in a situation that is catastrophic. They are sounding the alarm and have been for some time, but now are pleading with the entire world, please, for the love of fucking God, call for a ceasefire immediately. We have run out of fuel, and I'm sure everyone has seen the photos. We are now at a point where babies no longer have incubators in order to sustain life, which is going to, again, continue to result in mass death. Now, this story, I think, is one of those stories that was so horrifying that it actually shook some of the people who have completely turned off their humanity, some of the people who have completely been unable to, see this for what it is, and are unfortunately still continuing to propagate it. Many of those people marching in DC today to say a ceasefire is ridiculous, which is fucking horrifying. We are failing right now, collectively, as a human species. Palestinians trapped inside Gaza's biggest hospital were digging a mass grave on Tuesday to bury patients who died under the Israeli encirclement, and said no plan was in place to evacuate babies, despite Israel announcing an offer to send portable incubators. Israeli forces have surrounded Gaza. By the way, that is one of the cruelest and most fucked up attempts at PR in terms of saying, well, yes, okay, everyone's horrified, rightly so, and the baby's potentially dying from not having incubators, and yes, that may have been a concept so vile that it was almost used as a precursor for the first invasion of Iraq, when a false testimony was given that turned out to not be true about how Saddam Hussein's forces were unplugging babies' incubators in order to watch them die. That turned out not to be true, and yet when there's an actual event where babies are dying for no longer having the energy and fuel necessary to run their incubators, suddenly the idea of a ceasefire is being seen as ridiculous by world leaders like Mike Johnson, for example, third in line for the presidency, I might add. Hamas, Gaza's Israeli and Islamic group, denied fighters are present and says 650 patients, around 5,000 and 7,000 other civilians were trapped inside. Doctors Without Borders, which is a very esteemed organization, has said that people who are trying to leave, including patients, are being sniped. They're being shot. If you haven't seen the footage, there's video footage of a whole bunch of people from the hospital running around to the corner, waving white flags, playing, you know, telling people to stop and getting fired upon. There is, within the hospital, just mass death occurring. If you play the video of one of the doctors trying to plead with President Biden, saying, please stop, when is enough enough, all you hear in the background is people screaming. You know, it's just absolutely horrifying. In the name of humanity, the Secretary General calls for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Ashraf al-Qidra, Gaza's health ministry spokesman, reached by telephone inside the hospital compound, said there was about 100 bodies decomposing inside and no way to get them out. We were planning to bury them today in a mass grave at the Al-Shifa medical complex. It is going to be very dangerous as we don't have cover or protection from the ICRC. The men are digging right now as we speak. 36 babies are left from the neonatal ward after 3 died without fuel for generators to power incubators. The babies were kept as warm as possible, lined up 8 to a bed. It's like, it's so beyond fucked. So beyond fucked. Like, if a whole bunch of US government officials wanted to hold a rally, say on like October 8th, politically, that would make sense to me. Politically, that would make sense to be like, well, you just experienced one of the worst, terrorist attacks in your history. We are now in solidarity going to gather here to show and have a candlelight vigil to mourn the civilians killed and all that kind of stuff. That would make sense. Now, over a month into this, as we are reaching 6,000 dead children, thousands and thousands of kids suffocating to death under rubble right now. We've seen the bombing of hospitals, ambulances, schools, children's schools, refugee camps, and just the mass death that is occurring on a population that is being starved. That was the first fucking act to say they're cut off from all water, all food, all fuel, all electricity, all medical supplies. People are drinking open sewage. Doctors that have returned have said that some people are trying to live off just drops of water a day. People, like, the desperation of a starving populace of half children right now. War crimes that go beyond the scope of anything we thought we would witness live, because we're all seeing this in our fucking hands on cell phone devices. Now of all times, you hold a rally to say a ceasefire is ridiculous. What the fuck? Like, people are going to look back upon these kind of moments and be like, how could you be so callous?
The calls for a ceasefire are outrageous. We stand the cause for a...
Again, like, I don't even really have words for this. It's just beyond horrifying. I haven't seen all the clips yet. Let's just quickly look.
Hateful comment after another.
Most hours of the day.
Oh. Oh man. All right.
The loneliness. Mic check. I'll take it back. Most hours of the day, the loneliness is unbearable. But here's the thing. These so-called friends, they were never really our friends. They were never really there for us. They never really saw us for how we deserve to be seen.
It's the guy from Stranger Things, the comedian, and yeah, I guess he joins 2 members of the cast of Stranger Things right now that are openly endorsing the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, which is fucked.
Jog, a nightmare unfolded. One to
in a moment's notice.
that no group of Americans should have to live that way.
Let's start Chuck Schumer.
Thank you, everybody. We are here united, Democrat and Republican, House and Senate, to say we stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. We stand. We stand. We stand. We stand.
I mean, this is really, really hurting all the libs right now who are saying, oh, there is, you know, dramatic differences. Of course, there's differences between Republicans and Democrats. It would be foolish to say otherwise. In terms of this particular issue, they seem to be quite united. Quite united.
And we stand. Now, my friends, there are no words for the horror that happened 1 month ago in Israel. The most Jews killed in a single day since the Holocaust. It brings back much darker days. And let us not forget history. History shows that when the world ignored anti-Semitism in the last century, it led to the worst catastrophe in human history. 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. Let us not forget history. History shows that Israel was almost destroyed in 1967 and in 1973. We cannot, we must not let that happen again. Let us not forget history. History shows that anti-Semitism has been deep in the core of Europe for centuries, and that too many European nations have never been friends of Israel. And history shows that when anti-Semitism rears its ugly head, if it's not dealt with forcefully and directly, it grows into a deadly force.
Most fucked up thing about this is that anti-Semitism is very real and very alive in a lot of the West. In Canada, there's been multiple anti-Semitic attacks. There's been Jewish schools where people have shot at them. There's been the fire bombing or the attempted arsonist of Jewish institutions. Horrifying racist ass shit that should be condemned and called out. Associating all Jewish people with the state of Israel or trying to say that any criticism of another country, a sovereign country, by definition is anti-Semitism, is treating all Jewish people like a monolith and trying to associate Jewish people with what Israel is doing right now, like with what everyone is witnessing. It's absolutely horrifying, and not listening, by the way, to Jewish people. Like, did everyone just see all the rabbis, who were protesting the war, who were giving such incredible and brilliant and passionate speeches, who were speaking out against this? Like to see now that in amidst the horror that is taking place, we're at a time now where there is mass graves being dug at hospitals. When children are dying because there's no fuel to power their incubators, when thousands upon thousands of kids have been killed, we're now getting these rallies that have both senior political officials of the Democrats and the Republicans speaking out against the ceasefire.
But my friends, history reminds us also of one thing, that even in its darkest days, the United States.
We go right from Chuck Schumer to Mike Johnson.
Well, it is so good to be with you all. What an extraordinary crowd, and it was organized in just a few days. It's amazing, amazing. There are few issues in Washington that could so easily bring together leaders of both parties in both chambers. But the survival of the state of Israel and her people unites us together, and it unites all Americans. All Americans. Let me be very clear.
It does not. That is 100% false. If you look at the polling right now, the majority of Americans do not support this current military campaign. And there is overwhelming support right now for a ceasefire, as well as the fact that, like, this is going to devastate your chances politically, unless you don't care about winning the election. Again, it's one of those things where Democrats and liberals who are trying to shame anyone speaking out against this with a election a year away, if you are concerned about Donald Trump coming to power, then this should be your focus. You should be like, well, this isn't reflective of the will of the people. Maybe I should be spending some of my time online speaking out against things like genocide and ethnic cleansing, rather than trying to shame people who are speaking out against genocide and ethnic cleansing.
The United States stands unequivocally with our neighbor, our friend, our ally, Israel. They're neighbors in a global sense. That's right. Last week, a bipartisan group of members stood in solidarity on the steps of the House to mourn the lives in the October 7th attack and to grieve with the families of Israeli hostages that are still being held in Gaza. We heard heartbreaking and tragic accounts of their kidnappings. And of course, as you know, many of those families haven't received an update on their well-being since that day. As a parent—
By the way, this guy is a religious extremist. You should be ashamed to be on the same podium as him, let alone standing shoulder to shoulder. Like, the amount of stuff that has come out that his wife was running a fucking a website that compared having consensual sex between adults to bestiality, that equated them. Like, these people are freaks. He is a religious zealot. He has, like, he and his son monitor each other's porn content through an app that tracks every single thing and link that you look at on your electronic devices, and then sends your other person links to those or photos to those. It's called Covenant Eyes. Like, these are very, very dangerous individuals, and like, honestly, anyone who's guided as a moral compass exclusively by, well, yes, this is about you know, the word of God and all that kind of stuff, and that's how we should be conducting ourselves in 2023. He is a horrifying monster, and like, it's eroding all of the ability for you know, Democrats or progressives to be able to say, well, yes, we have to stop fascism. Meanwhile, before we get to that, that's a year away, you know, to stop the Donald Trump fascism that's coming in, we're going to support an extreme far-right government that is currently committing war crime after war crime after war crime after war crime. And we're going to hold rallies supporting, again, that extreme far-right government that is doing war crime after war crime after war crime.
Parent myself, I can begin to comprehend.
Oh, they do conversion therapy too. Of course they do.
Their despair. All of us feel that way. This morning we watched the horrific film that was produced by Hamas from their own cameras as they committed the assault. It's unspeakable. The auditorium was full of Republicans and Democrats in the House, and they wept as we watched the film together. Most couldn't sit through it. These Israeli hostages were kidnapped in their homes by barbaric Hamas terrorists for simply being Jewish and living in Israel. And as Prime Minister Netanyahu says so well, this is a fight between good and evil, between light and darkness, between civilization and...
He's repeating the same talking points, the same dehumanizing talking points, the same ones that multiple people, rightly so, were criticizing Israeli officials for using. You know, one of the official accounts tweeted out that this is a battle between darkness and light, between civilization and the law of the jungle. The law of the jungle was the fucking line that was used. Like, it could not be more fucking clear. And right now we're coming at a time, by the way, I should add, that again, you are seeing mainstream accounts and top officials, Israeli top officials, who are talking about how the West and Western countries need to start taking in a vast amount of Palestinian refugees, as in, this is the next step. We understand that there are millions of people there, so we're going to need a lot of people to take in, a lot of people to clear these areas out. And by the way, I'm going to say multiple things can be true at once. Yes, absolutely. Fucking Canada, America, all these countries should be taking in any and all refugees that are seeking asylum. In the same way, we opened our doors for Ukrainian refugees. Like there was a program that was put in place where you immediately can have at least a minimum of a 2-year visa in Canada. You can come over if you are Ukrainian. You know, kind of a no questions asked open border policy, which for Canada, which has an incredibly restrictive immigration. I know a lot of people think of Canada as progressive. Ask any person who has married a Canadian and tried to immigrate here how complex that process can be. It is not an open borders country by any means, and if people try to tell you that it is some progressive open borders country, they are lying to you. It is incredibly difficult to immigrate to Canada. But that being said, there was a policy where yes, we are going to welcome any Ukrainian trying to flee again the illegal occupation of Ukraine by Russia. Why wouldn't we do the exact same thing? What would the difference be between the two groups here? This is another group of people who are fleeing the illegal occupation of their land by another force.
Barbarism. The calls for a ceasefire are outrageous.
Like, just cheering. More than 11,000 Palestinians, 2/3 of them women and children, have been killed since the war began. This is what their homes look like. Israeli airstrikes in Gaza have killed more than a dozen people and destroyed the main hospital's cardiac ward, Gaza officials say, as fighting continues in the besieged strip for the 37th consecutive day. At least 13 people were killed in the Israeli airstrike in the home of Han Yunis, Gaza officials report on Sunday. Israeli forces continue their siege around Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, where health officials said thousands of staff, patients, and displaced people remain trapped with no electricity and dwindling supplies. The spokesperson for the Ministry of Health in Gaza, Ashraf Al-Qudra, told the Al Jazeera that Al-Shifa hospital is completely out of service, cannot provide any treatment even to patients inside the facility due to the constant Israeli attacks. Israeli bombings have targeted the vicinity, external surroundings, as well as one walking inside the courtyard between its various buildings and those wanting to reach the gate of the complex. We have deaths in the nursery after the life support machine stopped working inside the section, and includes 37 other children who are now on the verge of death. He added there are 5 deaths amongst the wounded as the medical teams were unable to perform surgical operations on them due to the power outage and lack of fuel. More than 11,000 Palestinians, 2/3 of them women and children, have been killed since the war began, according to the health ministry in Gaza. About 2,700 people have been reported missing and are thought to be trapped or dead inside rubble. A woman reacts as people stand amid the rubble of a destroyed building. Israeli soldiers take position amidst the ongoing ground operations in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian death toll also includes at least 192 medical staff. But hey, calls for a ceasefire are ridiculous, apparently. Keep bombing, keep killing, keep bombing, keep killing, keep crushing, keep starving, keep starving.
We stand with you in that. Hamas terrorists waged the bloodiest assault on Jewish lives since the Holocaust, and there are hundreds of hostages, many of them Americans, still stuck inside Gaza. Israel will cease their counteroffensive.
Maybe stop bombing them then. It's like, hey, by the way, there's a whole bunch of hostages inside the building. So what should we do? Oh, level it to the ground. What? Yeah, level the building to the ground. Because there's terrorists inside. Yeah, there's hostages inside too. The hostages that all of you are saying that you want released. Yep. Well, maybe that'll convince the terrorists to release the hostages. No. No, you're killing them all if you bomb the whole thing. Well, the terrorists are using the hostages as human shields. They've strapped them to their bodies, and that's what they're doing. Okay. Then if you bomb the human shields, you'll kill the human shields. If you bomb the buildings, you'll kill the hostages. Why? What?
When Hamas ceases to be a threat to the Jewish state. But Hamas's genocidal and anti-Semitic rhetoric isn't just confined to Gaza, as you know. The war in Israel has awakened an alarming amount of anti-Semitism towards Jewish people here in the United States and across the globe. From the halls of Congress to college campuses, this rise of anti-Semitism must be stopped. We've heard many echo the Hamas rallying cry of "from the river to the sea," and I'm convinced that a lot of these college students that are engaging in these protests do not understand that is an explicit call for the extermination of Israel. It is happening daily in our country, as you know, and it is unacceptable for Jewish Americans to feel unsafe at home. It is unacceptable for Jewish businesses to face violence, vandalism, and threats. It is unacceptable for universities to allow Hamas apologists to assault and accost Jewish students on campus. It is unacceptable for any political leader in this nation to give credence to this dangerous rhetoric. We can and we must do more to stand with our great ally and friend, and it is my hope that this gathering today serves as a reminder to the entire world, but also to those within our own borders, that the United States stands proudly with Israel and the Jewish people forever, forever.
This is also a motherfucker who wants the second coming of Jesus to occur. It's deeply, deeply horrifying this whole thing took place at a time right now.
Jerusalem is the city of God. Jerusalem is the shoreline of eternity. Jerusalem is the eternal capital of Israel today and forever.
Like, if you're worried about, you know, religious extremists trying to push ideology on children, look no further.
There is only one nation whose flag will fly over the ancient walls of the sacred city of Jerusalem. That nation is Israel, now and forever.
So if you're wondering who this guy is, this is John Hagee. Or Hagee? John Hagee? Yeah. He's a racist. He's a pretty extreme racist, yes, and who's been criticized heavily in the past for his deeply anti-Semitic remarks. Yeah, that guy. But I guess none of that matters anymore, right? Doesn't matter? So, he apparently blamed the Jews for the Holocaust and said that God sent Hitler to create Israel. He claimed God sent Hitler to create Israel, and on Tuesday he's prominently featured in one of the country's biggest pro-Israeli demonstrations since the conflict began October 7th. John Hagee, a mainstay in right-wing politics for decades, is reportedly invited to speak. He did speak, yep. With tens of thousands of people. The staunchly pro-Israel evangelical pastor is the leader of America's most prominent Christian Zionist organization, the Christians United for Israel, and has used that to influence the lobby of the U.S. government on a variety of issues, including Trump's controversial choice to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. God sent Adolf Hitler to help Jews reach the Promised Land, the pastor claimed in a 1999 sermon. He apologized a decade later, saying, "I grappled with the vexing question of why a loving God would allow evil of the Holocaust to occur. I regretted if my Jewish friends felt any pain as a result." After Hurricane Katrina killed 2,000 people, he blamed it on gays. Of course. There was to be a homosexual parade there on Monday that the Katrina came. I believe that the Hurricane Katrina was, in fact, a judgment of God against the city of New Orleans. He later semi-apologized, saying, "Neither I nor any other person can know the mind of God." Well, you seem to try to say that quite a bit. He later called America the new Sodom and Gomorrah after gay marriage was legalized. These statements highlight the irony of the pro-Israel movement aligning with anti-LGBTQ plus figures, while still uplifting the narrative that Israel is the only LGBTQ plus safe haven in the Middle East. And I'm sure we've all seen that horrifying photo going around of a destroyed Gaza. It's basically trying to rainbow wash colonization, which, great, you know, fucking keep trying to use LGBTQ plus people to justify horrifying atrocities and war crimes. The first ever pride flag raised in Gaza. He is a member of the LGBTQ plus community. He can't get married in Israel, but he still wanted to send a message of hope to the people of Gaza living under Hamas brutality. The people are dead and the homes are destroyed in the background. No one's going to be able to get any message of love. You can't really get messages when you're suffocating and inhaling concrete under fucking piles and piles of rubble. A statement have earned him condemnation and distancing from characters like John McCain and Sarah Palin, but not from the organizers of the March for Israel, the Jewish Federation, who historically expressed support for LGBTQ plus rights. If you are letting an out and proud anti-Semitic, racist, homophobic bigot speak at your rally, something is fundamentally wrong with your cause. And if there is absolutely no criticism of having an individual like that, again, speaking at the rally, getting thousands upon thousands of people to cheer after, you know, fucking Mike Johnson, yet another horrifying anti-LGBTQ plus bigot. These people are not on the side of queers. These people hate and want to eradicate them. And yet, you know, not only will individuals say, oh, by the way, this is a little bit about LGBTQ plus rights. Just want to let you know, they're pretty bad in Palestine. You know, they're pretty bad. I was like, yeah, you know what else is pretty bad there? Trying to survive, get water. Finding water is pretty bad. In the best of times in the Gaza Strip, apparently 93% of the water isn't potable. That's at the best of times, so that sounds like a challenge as well. Not surprisingly, he's upset his fair share of Israelis, a member of the Jewish diaspora, for his comments on Hitler and the Holocaust, his writing that the Antichrist is a half-Jewish homosexual, and his promotion of anti-Semitic theories about Jewish bankers controlling the Federal Reserve haven't gone well either. This is the goddamn face of anti-Semitism. This is a fucking racist asshole who spreads conspiracy theories about Jewish people. Like, holy fuck. And this is one of the speakers? How disconnected do you have to be to, like, stand on front of a podium from Chuck Schumer to Mike Johnson saying that, like, anti-Semitism is alive and well, and everyone who's criticizing the government of Israel is spreading anti-Semitic hate, but no more. We're no longer allowing that to be tolerated, all this kind of stuff. And here's our next speaker, a fucking guy who compares fucking, or said that, you know, the Jewish people brought on the Holocaust upon themselves, and that was a divine thing by God to create Israel. That sounds like a pretty fucked up dude who shouldn't be given a microphone, let alone a voice in this discussion. In response to the invitation to the march, Amy Spitalnik, a CEO of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, tweeted, "We can build broad coalitions with raging anti-Semites to speak about how criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic." I'm confused. I'm deeply confused. A progressive pro-Israel group concurred. "We completely agree. A dangerous bigot like Hagee should not be welcome anywhere in our community. Period. Israel is the apple of God's eye," he shouted. Israel's God chose of Israel. "Israel is my firstborn son." But what is he even saying? Did you think of a nation state as a child?
Those of us standing here and millions of other Christians were not here during the Holocaust, but we're here now. And we stand shoulder to shoulder with the Jewish people. We stand until those 240 hostages are returned to their homes.
Then stop bombing them, fucking disgusting ass anti-Semite. How do you have a raging prominent anti-Semitic fucking bigot at the march against anti-Semitic? This photo, this fucking picture. It's like, make it make sense. Make any of it make sense.
While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators.
This was the now debunked and false testimony that was given back before the first war in Iraq. Don't worry, there's been multiple ones. And George Bush Sr. Was also using it as an excuse to say that Saddam Hussein, previously friend and ally to the United States, was a bad dude, an evil man. Now, I'm not trying to deny that Saddam Hussein was a bad dude, absolutely was, but does that badness of Saddam Hussein justify the invasion of a sovereign country once or twice? you know? And this story was seen as something so horrifying that it was beyond the pale, that no one possibly could stand idly by, and that it would justify perhaps the invasion of Kuwait, because at the end of the day, they were literally unplugging babies' incubators to watch babies die. And that's just something so horrifying that, you know, every single suburban mom could sit there aghast, you know, and suddenly be like, we have to do something. We got to do something. We got to get in there. Yeah, no, I agree. Let's do it.
Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
You just watched a portion of gut-wrenching testimony from the early 90s from a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl who claims that she witnessed Iraqi soldiers actually remove babies from incubators and left them on the floor to die. That testimony really spoke to the barbarity of Saddam Hussein's regime, and that testimony was used to manufacture consent for then-President George H.W. Bush's Gulf War. The problem, however, is that it was a hoax, and she was lying.
Nayira's testimony was rebroadcast across the country and marked a turning point in public opinion on going to war. President George H.W. Bush repeatedly cited her claims.
They had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
3 months after Nayira testified, President George H.W. Bush launched the invasion of Iraq. But it turned out Nayira's claims weren't true. No human rights group or news outlet could confirm what she said. It also turned out Nayira was not just any Kuwaiti teenager. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States, Saad Nasir al-Sabah. She had been coached by the public relations firm Hill & Knowlton, which was working for the Kuwaiti government.
Now, in a 1992 write-up about that lie in the New York Times, John MacArthur explained Amnesty International believed the tale, and its ill-considered validation of the charges likely influenced the 7 U.S. senators who cited the story in speeches supporting the January 12th resolution authorizing war. Now, the reason why we're talking about this is because the thought of babies being taken out of incubators to be left to die was so appalling to politicians, rightfully so, that they felt compelled to take action immediately. But fast forward to today, and babies are actually being taken out of incubators. And this time, it's because there's no electricity to maintain the incubators. And the difference now, compared to the 90s, is that politicians don't feel compelled to take action. Most still refuse to call for a ceasefire despite being fully aware that they are effectively complicit with this.
The ground operations are right at the gates of Al-Shifa Hospital right now. Hospital officials are saying there is fighting literally in the blocks surrounding the hospital.
Shifa at this point is completely surrounded by Israeli forces, Israeli tanks, and there are Israeli drones overhead that anybody who tries to step outside the buildings, there are several buildings that make up the complex that is the Shifa Hospital, anybody stepping outside comes under fire. Now, there are 20,000 people taking refuge in the hospital itself, in addition to the 400 patients that doctors are treating.
The World Health Organization is now saying Al-Shifa Hospital, the largest, most important medical facility in the Gaza Strip, is effectively no longer functional. There is no running water. There is no electricity. There is the bare minimum of medical operations going on at this point. There are some 600 patients inside the hospital, Andrea, but no case is more urgent than the dozens of prematurely born babies who were being held in the neonatal unit there. The electricity is gone. Those newborns, some of them younger than this war itself, have been taken out of their incubators. They were, last we heard, being held in the surgery unit at Al-Shifa Hospital. Dozens of tiny, tiny Gazans on 2 beds being kept together, swaddled to try to keep them warm. In some cases, medical officials respirating them with their hands, trying to keep them breathing, basically doing everything they can to keep them alive. Hospital officials tell us at least 3 of these newborns have died so far. And I spoke earlier to Dr. Shireen Abed. She is the former head of neonatal care at Al-Shifa Hospital. She says she has no doubt in her mind that more of them are going to die if there is not a solution found urgently.
And in addition to that, there are dozens of bodies of people who have been killed that are essentially piled up outside the hospital, but they can't.
And now is the time when a whole bunch of fucking politicians decided to hold a rally. A rally where people were chanting that fucking no ceasefire. Ceasefire is ridiculous. Monsters.
Be buried because of the fighting that's going on around it.
And Andrea, this is a scenario we are seeing playing out all across the Gaza Strip right now, that key humanitarian facilities are running out of their last drops of fuel. UNRWA, the United Nations, says they are going to have to close their humanitarian operations in the next 48 hours if they do not get more fuel in.
It is genuinely difficult to watch. Now, I stitched together reporting from CNN and MSNBC because they both provide us with different details that paint the same bleak picture, and I didn't want it to be too redundant by showing you 2 different clips, but that's what you saw. Now, if the mere testimony of babies being pulled from incubators in the 90s galvanized action by U.S. lawmakers, you would think that actually seeing pictures of babies would do the same thing. I mean, they're real. We can see them. And doctors themselves from Al-Shifa Hospital have explained that the situation is a catastrophe.
Also, did you see that, like, you know, IDF soldiers inside the hospital were pointing towards evidence that the entire thing was a Hamas stronghold, and they were pointing at, like, this wall right here, we have, look at that, this is a calendar of targets and blah, blah, blah. This right here is a definitive proof that this, in fact, was a military outpost. And I don't know why you would be so brazen in something like that when anyone capable of translating it, who actually speaks the language, can and did immediately. And we're like, that's a calendar. Those are the days of the week. That's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Are you fucking serious? That's all you need now? And at the same, like, this is how brazen they've become in terms of, you know, trying to push this kind of narrative on people when you have to sit back and be like, but that's not reality. We can see with our own eyes, you know? There was an Israeli top official who was saying that they had found copies of Mein Kampf, in, like, you know, the children were reading Mein Kampf and stuff like that. And you're like, I don't know what to say at this point. You know, yeah, it's as if truth has absolutely no meaning. Like, this is more horrifying than any fucking potential sketch could ever think of.
And as the fighting takes place, they are forced to stay because if they leave, that means they're abandoning their patients. They're leaving these babies to die. So that means they're sitting ducks. They could be bombed next. So let's listen to the doctors and what they have to say.
On the 4th floor, and also there's a sniper who attacked 4 patients from the inside the hospital. One of them has the gunshot directly in his neck, and he has a quadriplegia, and the other one, he has a gunshot in the abdomen. Some of the people which actually go outside the hospital, they want to go to the south, they bomb them also, they bomb the family. We can see actually the smoke around the hospital. They hit everything around the hospital, and they hit the hospital many times. Situation, as I said before, very, very bad.
Why don't you go with your family south?
And if I go, who treats my patients? They are not animals. They have the right to receive proper health care. You think I went to medical school and for my postgraduate degrees for a total of 14 years, so I think only about my life and not my patients? I'm asking you, ma'am, do you think this is the reason why I went to med school? To think only about my life? This is not the reason why I became a doctor.
Now, unfortunately, that was the very last interview from Dr. Hammam Allo before he was killed in his home with his father by an IDF airstrike. And, quote, his mother, who is also a doctor, Dr. Haifa al-Sarraj, is trapped with other relatives, including children, in the vicinity of the house. They are unable to move, and any attempt to move comes under heavy Israeli fire. One relative is also currently alive and trapped under rubble. They have been in touch with the Red Cross, who are unable to evacuate them. The Israeli Defense Forces need to cease fire in the Abu Hasira neighborhood so they can be safely evacuated. This devastation is incomprehensible. And the Al-Shifa hospital is not the only hospital that is getting bombed. Now, guess what Israel's excuse is? Well, Hamas, they're at the hospital. They're using these patients as human shields. It doesn't fucking matter. You don't get to bomb hospitals ever. And it's not just patients who are at risk there. There are people in shelter at these hospitals. So this is one of those situations where the destruction is so catastrophic that it's almost difficult.
Breaking the tunnels under Gaza hospitals turned out to be connected with the Comet Pizza basement in Washington, D.C. Well, we have verified proof. It was on InfoWars.
To fathom. Like, it's hard to even picture it as you see it. Like, I kind of just go numb. That's how bad it is. And I'm sure you all feel the same way. And Dr. Hamam Allo died a hero because he refused to abandon his patients. He could have evacuated to the south, although that's not a sure bet that he'd be safe, but he could have been with his family. But he said, I'm not going to abandon my patients. And he died in his home, by the way. And even though it is predictably what we all expected would happen, even though we all knew it would come to this, where doctors are being killed and babies are literally dying because the hospitals no longer have any electricity, American politicians still can't find it upon themselves to utter the words ceasefire. Now, President Biden was asked about this in particular, especially considering that the blood of those babies is on his hands as well, and his response was just awful, predictably, and pathetic, as you're going to see, and his body language really says it all.
The hospital in Gaza, Kelly was in. Gaza, have you expressed any specific concerns to Israel on that, sir?
Well, you know, I have not been reluctant in expressing my concerns what's going on. And it's my hope and expectation that there will be less intrusive action relative to the hospital. We're in contact and we're with the Israelis. Also, there's an effort to...
That's just, it's as fucking far as you can go, eh? Less intrusive action. It's quite a cannon fodder way of putting everything, you know?
Take this pause to deal with the release of prisoners. And that's being negotiated as well with the Qataris that are engaged. And so I remain...
Yeah. History's going to remember you all as monsters. It's going to look back upon these kind of moments, these clips of hearing people clearly, visibly shook. Because, yeah, there's only so much the fucking, you know, the human brain can comprehend on a daily basis being fed to you by all this incredible social media access that we all have. And every morning you wake up, it's like, oh, that's what the fucking children's corpses look like. Oh, that's what a pile of dead children look like. Oh, yeah, that's what dead babies look like. Oh, yeah, that's what a pile of dead babies looks like. So, yeah, everyone is getting very emotional and very broken. Clearly not enough to actually have any humanity, though. Clearly not enough to see these as people worthy of having lives, because you still just sit there cowardly trying to cover up what is taking place. Less intrusive action. Yes, perhaps they could scale things down slightly.
Somewhat hopeful, but the hospital must be protected.
Well, it's a little late for that, don't you think? Look, he knows what he's doing. You could see it in his body language. He's mumbling, his head is down, he's trying to find some way to express concern while avoiding the elephant in the room, which is he's complicit. That's his fault there too. And the U.S. State Department won't officially acknowledge Israel's war crimes, despite them saying we're going to do collective punishment, despite ample evidence that they are using white phosphorus. The State Department is still officially saying that there's no evidence of war crimes. Although there's a lot of heroes within the State Department who are brave enough to not toe the line and call out that bullshit. Axios reports an internal State Department dissent memo accuses President Biden of spreading misinformation on the Israel-Hamas war and alleges that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza, according to a copy of the memo obtained by Axios. The scathing 5-page memo, organized by a junior diplomat who has suggested on social media that Biden's support of Israel has made him complicit in genocide in Gaza, offers a rare look at the raw divisions within the Biden administration over the Israel-Hamas war. The memo, signed by 100 State Department and USAID employees, urges senior U.S. officials to reassess their policy toward Israel and demand a ceasefire in Gaza, where more than 11,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war, according to Gaza's Hamas-controlled health ministry. And by the way, of the 11,000 Palestinians killed so far, more than 4,100 of them have been children. Absolutely barbaric. And yet, politicians are still too afraid to call for a ceasefire. I mean, they are despicable. Now, this memo from the State Department comes almost a month after HuffPost initially reported that a mutiny
I should say just Macron within the, G7 NATO nations.
Was brewing within the State Department.
Multiple other countries have been leading the charge on this, I saw the other day, Lula held a press event where he was welcoming Palestinian refugees into the country. Multiple countries in South and Central America have either cut off ties or pledged to no longer support or do any business with Israel as long as the continued occupation is enacted.
Specifically over the Biden administration's handling of this situation. And I guess now it looks like the chickens are finally coming home to roost for Joe Biden. Now, due to massive public pressure as well as a significant drop in the polls, well, Biden's administration has been forced to at least adjust course a little bit. So he's managed to work out a 4-hour pause per day of fighting, and he's also feigned more concern over innocent Palestinians. But yet, the administration recently reiterated that they're still not drawing any red lines for Israel, and a ceasefire is not on the table. And that seemingly still hasn't changed even after learning about babies dying due to a lack of electricity. And even when he was asked about the hospital, if you'll notice, he did not condemn Israel. He says, yes, I want to protect the hospital, still won't condemn Israel, still won't call out their war crimes. And we're all going to give them more money? I mean, what is happening here? It's just, our politicians are awful. And it's not just Biden. I mean, the pro-life Republicans who claim to care about life don't even pretend to care at all about dying babies in Gaza. And it's not just the far right, it's also the left. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, even though they're much better at performatively expressing sympathy than other politicians, I mean, they're not even calling for a ceasefire. In fact, most politicians are still telling us to go fuck ourselves when we ask for a ceasefire. John Fetterman, for example, aka Kirsten Sinema in a hoodie, was literally waving an Israeli flag to antagonize protesters calling for a ceasefire, and they were even arrested for civil disobedience, and that was him right there antagonizing them. What a piece of shit. And to be clear, there's no excuse for any politician. I don't care who you are, if you're on the left or the right, there's no excuse for any of you. Because it's not like you don't know what we want. They've seen the protests that we've all seen.
Oh,
They've
yeah,
looked at
and there's been enough, leaked cables, we'll say, to talk about how so many staffers have been reporting that they've never seen a divide between their actual employers, their politicians and the public, and how they're being flooded every single time they check their machines or letters or messages with people demanding a ceasefire right now.
the same polls that we've looked at. And on top of that, they're...
Al Jazeera is reporting that the IDF is going to storm Al-Shifa within minutes. I guess I'll turn to that live. Really good job, as always, by the way, by Mike. He's absolutely crushing these videos.
From Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It will end on Saturday at the Prime Minister's office. The families of those being held currently inside of the Gaza Strip are looking for answers from the Israeli government. They say that it has essentially failed them with receiving any sort of information about their loved ones. And remember, just last week, there was polling done among the Israeli society that said that 59% of those polled in this survey supported a ceasefire in exchange for the captives. And among the schools of thoughts were varying ideas of just getting information.
Someone just sent me, you have to watch this Van Jones clip from 1993.
In 1960, the students could do that in 1970, the students could do that in 1985 and 86, in 1993, when we have the United States government building a death camp, a concentration camp for black people who have done nothing wrong but get sick and want justice. That's all they've done wrong. If we can't close that death camp, if this generation cannot prevent another Japanese American internment in our lifetime, we should all get haircuts and go get regular jobs and give it up.
A partial release, an all-for-all exchange of the prisoners. But the main message they're trying to send here is to put pressure on both army and Israeli politicians to do more to get back doctors operating in the
Urgent. Gaza held to Al Jazeera. The occupation informed us its intention to storm the Shifa complex in the coming minutes.
Those hospitals have denied this. They said they have never seen anything like this. The Israeli military has said that they have concrete proof, but they have not released any of that intelligence or information for us to see. The Israeli military spokesperson's comments perhaps indicate that his army is ready to do something quickly, ready to attack the hospital, to bombard the hospital. We do know that tanks have been circling in on the hospital, not just in recent days, but in recent weeks, saying that it's a legitimate target. And at the same time, we are hearing that Israel has approved 24,000 liters of fuel to enter the Gaza Strip. However, it will not be used for hospitals who are in dire need of it. It will simply be used for United Nations trucks that are going in and out of the Gaza Strip. This comes after reports indicate that there was pressure by the United States for the UN to accept this fuel. There's been no comment from the Israelis and no comments from Hamas on the matter either. Elizabeth.
All right, Hamda, thank you very much for that. Hamda Salhuth joining us live from occupied East Jerusalem. And some news just coming into us. We are hearing about the situation at Al-Shifa Hospital, Gaza's largest. And what we're hearing is that the Gaza Health Ministry are saying, a spokesman for the Gaza Health Ministry is saying that Israel has informed Gaza officials that it will raid the hospital shortly. Tens of, or rather thousands of patients and people are sheltering from the Israeli bombardment at Shifa Hospital. We will bring you more on this as we get the information. Again, just reiterating the Gaza Health Ministry spokesman saying that Israel has informed Gaza officials that they will be raiding Al-Shifa Hospital. US President Joe Biden says he believes the release of Israeli captives is going to happen, but he hasn't given details of how their release might come about. For more on this, Mike Hanna is joining us from Washington, D.C. And
also, it's been like very impressive seeing so many news reporters, you know, continue to provide coverage of all this and not just continuously break down or shut down. And then also there has been the moments when you see, you know, that there's only so much professionalism, there's only so much training you can have before it just totally breaks you. Yeah, I can't believe the disconnect and the juxtaposition that's going on right now of seeing those rallies, watching those rallies that were just taking place with Republicans and Democrats alike, speaking on the same podium as a fucking two raging, fucking homophobic, anti-Semitic, fucking religious extremists, Mike Johnson and John Hagee, fucking speaking together, it has absolutely, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, make it make sense. You know, having those disgusting ass fucking ghouls speaking at a rally against anti-Semitism, one of whom is just a raging anti-Semite. even from an optics perspective or a political perspective. Like, how are you going to juxtapose those images, this image here, with this? Like a fucking noted anti-Semitic, racist, asshole, homophobe. Just one of the hate preachers. An extremist hate preacher. Like, Chuck, how are you going to be calling out far-right extremism? You know? Mike Johnson is right there. This is far-right extremism. This is Christian nationalism. This is the fucking face of it. Ugh, it's maddening.
In Sao Paulo, Brazil, we set a record for the month of November.
And just a reminder, this is what they said.
Ceasefire are outrageous.
The thing that's happening right now is that, like, you know, the vote blue no matter who crowd and the liberals, they think that if you point out that, you know, domestically, especially when it happens to include LGBTQ plus people, the Democrats are decidedly different than the Republicans, right? But in both cases, you know, we'll admit that they both seem to be very strong supporters of Israel and what Israel is doing. And obviously, I'm not here to endorse the over 5,000 kids that have been killed, you know, but this kind of comes down to if you had a choice. And why don't we put it in terms of this, by the way? I was wondering why the fuck 99% Hitler was trending. It's like, what the fuck? Why is 99%? Is this a joke about the Hitler particles, that meme that everyone's talking about now? Hitler particles, and all that kind of shit. And then you click on it and it's like, well, if you did have a choice between someone who is 100% Hitler and someone who's 99% Hitler, you'd obviously choose the 99% Hitler. It's like, no, you can't choose a Hitler. That's by, like, you know, that's a Hitler. You don't want any Hitler. You know, you got to have a choice between someone who's not a little bit Hitler, or in this case, majority Hitler. Like, holy fuck. Yeah, it's horrifying. Newsmax Greg Kelly, they say that Donald Trump is like Hitler. He's using the same words that Hitler used. Well, Hitler used the word chair, okay?
Over the top, anybody? Now, this is basically any day. Over the top, anybody? Now, over the top, anybody? Now, this is basically any day when you're watching mainstream media, but they need new stuff to react to, right? So this is it. This is what they say set them off, right? Something that Hitler would say.
We pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country, that lie and steal and cheat on elections and will do anything possible. They'll do anything, whether legally or illegally, to destroy America and to destroy the American dream.
The American dream.
I agree with him. A lot of that stuff is actually happening. Look, he's going into a bit more detail about draining the swamp, all right? You're allowed to talk about draining the swamp, and, you know, there are some really strange people there, like this person in the Pentagon who seems to be in total cahoots with Iran. Are you following this? Now, they say that Donald Trump is like Hitler. He's using the same words that Hitler used. Well, Hitler used the word chair. Okay? I sit in a chair. That doesn't make me right. You
Gonna be honest, when you're being compared to one of the greatest monsters in human history, you probably want a more rock-solid defense than that. If someone's like, hey, buddy, you're kind of showing high rates of Hitler particles. Well, hold on, okay? Just think of this for a second. Hitler ate food. I also eat food. And think about it, right? Checkmate.
see, but they don't stop, do they? Yeah, Is this a problem? I guess it is.
So you'd think that one was silly, but then I saw this next headline. Fascism is much, much more progressive than anything that I believe in.
Speaking of dictators, the Democrats.
Oh, yeah. Media Matters, you got to start out your videos.
Speaking of dictators, the Democrats, they've got a new strategy for taking down Donald Trump. Well, they have a strategy for taking down Donald. The new strategy is the same as the old strategy. It's the strategy that they have been using the entire time to finally take down Donald Trump, and it is to compare him to a fascist dictator.
In honor of our great veterans on Veterans.
How do you say chair in German? It's Stuhl?
Stuhl.
Stuhl. Ah, so maybe Hitler didn't use the word chair. He actually used the word Stuhl.
Today, we pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the dangerous.
Think he should probably pay some royalties to Mussolini's family trust, because when he starts talking about rooting out communists, Marxists, radical left, vermin, destroying the country, he's lifting it from Mussolini and other fascists from the past.
Wow. Whoa. What an amazing, interesting take. I've never heard anything like that before. Joe Scarborough, he just made me see Donald Trump in an entirely new light. Because you see...
Isn't it wild to find out that he's a failed actor? Because, like, you know, boy's got chops. He could have gone out of the way, you know? Could have lived his dream.
Hold on, I don't know if you caught this.
Like, he took time out of his potential to be a fucking A-lister to do this for you, because, like, you know, this was his true calling. It was more important.
Joe Scarborough is calling Trump a fascist. Wow, man, that must be why they pay him tens of millions of dollars a year. That's why he makes the big bucks, for really insightful, perspicacious takes like that.
Perspicacious?
Duh! Conservative is fascist, duh! What a stupid...
So you clearly went from one moment where you're using those big city words, you know, us common folk ain't supposed to know, but then you go to a sketch that I guess most common folk are gonna get.
Level of political discourse we have in this country. That's the height. Because Joe Scarborough, he wears glasses. You know, he wears glasses. He has a necktie.
Oh, it's on a chair this time.
He's on MSNBC. You know, this is really high level stuff here.
It's just gonna be that Hitler did it.
Duh. Conservatives are fascists. Duh. It's so dumb. And so what's the response? What do conservatives say to this? I think 10 or 15 years ago, what conservatives would have said is, no, we're not fascists. No. We actually, you just don't understand. We support smaller government. And then what that argument, what that rejoinder turned into over time was, actually, Democrats, when you really think about it, you're the real fascists.
You can't say you support smaller government and then you want to support the largest government expenditure programs that exists, like, say, the U.S. military. How about that program? That one's very, very large. That's a big program. But don't worry, both Democrats and Republicans alike love that one. That one's just everyone's on board with the military-industrial complex. In terms of limited government and not actually infringing upon people's rights, what about taking away half the population's bodily autonomy and forcing them to give birth against their will? That one seems like a bit of a big reach for a small government to be doing. What about locking up people, and disproportionately people who happen to be people of color, in jail for using drugs? That seems like a pretty big government overreach, you know? I have seen some movements, usually led by bluer states, but some red states have tried to legalize the marijuana. But then, you know, that's usually met with a lot of pushback from the right, who want to continue the war on drugs. Because I guess, again, it disproportionately gets people of color locked up and put in those prisons, which, again, you know, sometimes can make you money if you got money in the whole prison industrial complex, that kind of stuff. But that does seem like big government, right? It doesn't really seem like the limited small government that they preach.
Because you see, you want to wield government power more than we do. So you're just totally misunderstanding this whole situation. Because if anyone, I'm not saying anyone's a fascist here, but if anyone's going to be like a fascist, it's you, not us. And now, do you know what the answer is?
Are you gonna spider meme this one? Like, you could at least try to be like, well, here's what fascism is. We're gonna pull up the list here. We're gonna run down the list, and here's ways in which I believe my political opponents have to be fascist, or it's just gonna be like this.
Do you know what I think? At least this is my conservative answer to Joe Scarborough or any other Democrat who knows nothing about political philosophy, who knows certainly nothing about fascism, who knows nothing about the American political order as it once was and could be again. My answer is, okay, whatever, bro. Sure.
Epic. Fucking takedown time. Knowles is going hard. Fucking, you know, he's like, he's doing the dude. That's just like your opinion, man.
Sure. No, but you're a fascist. You're just like Mussolini. Okay, that's fine. I got a little more hair than Mussolini. I don't know. My jaw is not quite as wide, but sure, fine. Okay, why not? Why not? Fascism doesn't mean anything anymore. It once actually did.
If you like it, for example, or if you just absolutely know nothing about it or what it is. And if you did, because again, if you ask like one of them, can you define fascism? They'd probably stop at the point. Actually, we've seen this. Steven Crowder fucking did this. Alexa fucking served him up. And it's like when you get to the point where it's like a far right political ideology, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, well, hold on. What were the Nazis called? What's the name? The National Socialists, see? Socialism.
It means something. And unlike Joe Scarborough or any Democrat really at all at the national level, I've read the founding documents of fascism. For goodness sakes, my double major was in Italian literature. There isn't that much to read if you study Italian.
Okay, sorry, wait, what? There's Italian literature that's not fascist. Holy fuck. There's anti-fascist Italian literature. Look, my double major was Italian literature, and all I did was read Mussolini. And I gotta say, like, I know quite a bit about fascism and why it's actually kind of okay.
Literature. It's Dante, Petrarch, Boccaccio, and the fascists.
I read Dante. It was actually pretty good.
The fascist poets and the theorists and the aesthetic philosophers, and it's people like
Divine Comedy.
Marinetti and
In terms of older stuff,
and
I usually find old stuff
and Mussolini
dry,
and a bunch of poets in the 20th century. So, yes, I've read all the documents. I'm not a fascist. I don't agree with the premises of fascism.
So you weren't just listing a whole bunch of documents that can educate someone on fascism. And yes, absolutely. You could read the works of fascists who try and understand fascism, in addition to people who were criticizing fascism would probably be valuable as well.
Fascism is much, much more progressive than anything that
Otherwise, you're just like reading Mussolini or fucking reading Mein Kampf and then suddenly being like, oh, well, yeah, I studied the works. It was actually quite illuminating.
I believe in. But sure, you're going to call me that? All right, whatever.
Oh, Gramsci, are you kidding me?
Does Scarborough think it's going to work this time? Is this real? The Democrats have exhausted everything else. They accused Trump of being a Russian stooge, a KGB sleeper cell. They accused Trump of then colluding with the Ukrainians, who were at war with the Russians, but he colluded with both, I guess. They accused Donald Trump of injecting people with bleach. They accused Donald Trump.
Was Gramsci assassin? I think he was imprisoned. He was imprisoned until his death. He died in jail as a political prisoner who opposed fascism.
Trump of raping a woman in a Bergdorf Goodman 30 years ago. They accused Donald Trump of donating too much money to his own campaign. They accused Donald Trump of calling the Secretary of State of Georgia while he was president of the United States. Totally fine. They accused Donald Trump of having classified documents that he had every right to have when he was president of the United States. And what? Now they're back? Now they've gone full circle. They're back to you're a fascist. Okay. I guess Donald Trump's getting elected then. If that's the best they've got, I guess. Unless maybe it'll work this time.
You know, the sad fucking thing about that is, like, he's not actually wrong if you're looking at polling. Like, that alone is not going to drive Democrats. Like, if you want to salvage this election and stop Donald Trump, and I say this to a lot of people who are right now trying to use this as an opportunity to shame people online who oppose things like ethnic cleansing or genocide, then you have to get them to oppose those things. Because in the key battleground states, including Michigan, you can't keep ignoring voters, especially young voters and Muslim voters and Arab voters who have turned out in large numbers for you. And a lot of those voters are registered in a key battleground state that you need to win. You cannot win those states by simply saying, well, we're not great, but we're not as bad as that. So don't do the worst one. Don't be a fool. Support us, even though we're not great and going to continue to be not great. You know, don't draw the line at the whole, you know, funding that whole ethnic cleansing overseas thing, because the other guy would do it too. You know that.
Now, speaking of fake news, here's a story. Here's a real fake news story. Now, speaking of fake news, here's a story. Not a woman's name. Chris is a man's name. So you're saying this.
Yeah, I'm not going to pay attention to this right now. All right. We got the speech already. I wanted to see Piers Morgan go. Can you get in trouble for watching Haz on Tim Pool? Like if you watch when Vosh was, I got banned for watching Vosh while he was banned. I was watching like a Vosh debate Sargon of Akkad stream, and I got banned for that for I think fucking 7 days or so. And that was one of those bannings where I was like, oh well, I was watching his stream though, so I can understand you're watching a stream of a streamer. But man, I find Haz to be one of the funniest human beings on the planet, and I really want to watch Haz on Tim Pool, you know? I haven't covered Haz in so long, but Haz is banned, you know? He's banned, and he blocked me, by the way. I can't have fun with him anymore. He got tired of me being silly. I'm kind of a slippery fool to someone like Haz, because I'm just like, you know, kind of proud of being strange and being a weirdo, and then he's just always so blown away by how aspects of people are on online culture. He thinks they're all depraved and degenerate. Like, did you ever see him? Fucking, he lost it at Caleb Maupin. If you don't know Caleb Maupin, the Spanky Tanky, he used to be like the dude. They had an alliance, you know, and the two would help support one another, and they were the true leftists, calling out all the faux shit libs who are just fucking progressives who love AOC and worship at the teat and all these other weird shit like that. And you're just like, okay, y'all are a bunch of weirdos. And then it turned out that he was a Spanky Tanky, that Caleb Maupin is accused of running a sex cult where he both made the living conditions and employment of former drug addicts dependent on whether or not they would perform unwanted sexual acts upon him. That's fucking horrifying. What an absolute fucking monstrous human being that Caleb Maupin. And so that wasn't enough to make Haz cut ties with him. It was the spanking. That's what made Haz, like, when you watch the video of it, Haz is like, I don't know how anyone can call themselves a communist or a socialist leader and get fucking spanked. You cannot get spanked if you are a... I was like, oh, little baby Peggy Waggy, you know, little Peggy Waggy. So insecure. Like, he's so insecure about this kind of shit. You do not get spanked. You do the spanking. It's like, oh, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. You know, if the love of your life wants to experiment a little bit, try some things out. You never know what you might find. Some of it you might not like. Some of it you might love. Who knows? Who knows? Don't close the door on all that kind of stuff. You know. Maybe if I use the beanie. Let me find the beanie. It's gonna be tough though, because gotta put the beanie on. Let's learn about MAGA communism.
Normal people become terrified of criminals.
Production mean?
The means of production basically refer to the fundamental basis and conditions for the production of things.
Only material things? What about intellectual property?
No, there's no such thing in the Marxist view. Basically, I view personally intellectual property is a scam, basically. Even in terms of classical liberal values, I think it's a transgression of... I think it's completely illegitimate.
Intellectual property?
Yes.
So what about... so what's the incentive then for invention if you can't own what you've invented? You have to, like, hide the secrets and make sure no one ever finds out how you did it?
I believe...
Let's do some learning. Perspective on public goods and property rights are a fundamental part of communist theory and philosophy. Much of the core tenets of modern communism stem from the ideas of public property and the definition of the ownership of society. Communist philosophy argues that private property supports collective ownership. This philosophy applies specifically to intellectual property and software. The common view is that no person should, on their own, control any property, whether electronic, merely an idea, or otherwise. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels argue in the Communist Manifesto that intellectual property also is always a product of society. Even when I carry out a scientific work, etc., and activity, which I can seldom conduct in direct association with other men, I perform a social, because human act. From this perspective, all theories that reference views on physical property can be appropriately shifted to refer to intellectual property as well. So, no, you don't get to discount the very idea of it as if it doesn't exist. You have to incorporate it. These ideas can be computer algorithmic and software. Communists believe in the idea of open sharing of software. Modern communist theorists like Martin von Hussain argues that sharing of software and ideas benefits society because human knowledge and the product of human labor is used to advance of all society. In this framework, no programmer is compensated personally for their work. The entire society benefits by making source code available because everyone will collectively work on software as well as collectively reap the benefits. Communist theory about software is similar to traditional open source arguments that open source sharing can provide greater access by multiple people, and therefore the greatest minds can do all the work at once, thus producing higher quality software.
Credit can be given to people, and notoriety and fame and due glory can be given to inventors and creative geniuses. But one of the things I dislike about intellectual property is that one's product should be good on the merits. If someone can simply replicate your product,
it's because he hates fucking what he considers to be like the petit bourgeois. He doesn't think that striking unions, if they happen to be in the gaming industry, in the film industry, in the writing industry, or any of that kind of labor, none of that labor is actual like productive labor. He always shits all over it. And it's like, that's what all of the AOC leftists want you to believe and be into.
I don't think this steals anything from you. I think they're just.
I mean, let's try this. If it was legal within the current system for people to take all of my content that I produce and immediately re-upload it wherever they wanted, I would cease to exist overnight. So, for instance, my morning show, the Tim Pool Daily Show, I produce 4 segments per day, and they're not allowed to be taken, right? It's my opinion, my commentary. There's fair use arguments, so there's a limit to people are allowed to take it, play the video and talk over it because it's not a replication of the work. It's
yeah, and it actually kind of looks like he's inside the beanie. Because it like the curvature of the chair fits it perfectly, like a massive beanie.
Something different. But if there was no intellectual property controls, as soon as I uploaded the video, 70 other channels would upload the exact same thing. It would decentralize my ability to generate ad revenue, attention, and make money, and I'd stop doing it instantly.
So for content creators, it is a necessity right now. I'm not going to deny that. But I.
So you'll make an exception for the work in which you have. Oh, I wasn't talking about YouTubers. YouTubers get intellectual property rights because, you know, we all create, you know, intellectual property that requires us to be heavily monetized for what we do. So YouTubers are the exception. But otherwise, yes, in MAGA communism, we do not believe such a thing even exists.
I think with two things, the advances of technology and a transformation of the financial system. See, one of the reasons content creators rely on intellectual property is they need it to generate revenue. The means of generating revenue for someone who's uploading your content to their channel and your channel seem to be the same, right? But with, for example, innovations in the sphere of software technologies like blockchains, there are ways to verify and authenticate the original source.
I didn't know he was a crypto bro. When did that happen? I missed out on so much. Holy shit.
But what does that mean? I mean,
the original.
If I can't control.
Oh my god, I love this.
Right. How the revenue generation for a piece of content. It doesn't matter if people know it's mine.
I think it can matter because if we, for example, entering into the fourth industrial revolution in a kind of...
Well, okay, so we've just moved on past that. You're not going to answer that question. If you're referring to blockchain, then yes, there's a permanent online ledger of the transactions that take place between people who are using it to, again, transfer tokens from one individual to another. The address will be available, so the address of the wallets will be available, and the amount of the cryptocurrency in question being transferred. That's a permanent ledger of it. I don't know how it applies to what you're talking about. If you're talking about applying that specifically to people who produce YouTube content, for example, yes, you could encode that kind of stuff on a blockchain and stuff like that to be able to produce a permanent record of it, but that doesn't answer the question of Tim Pool saying, how do I get paid?
Post commodity money economy, your acquisition of wealth could very well be tied to your signature, your blockchain signature, rather than simply some kind of...
By the way, so much of what he's trying to do, which is to promote this idea, because socially, Haas, Jackson Hinkle, Caleb Maupin, all of them, they're very aligned with far-right Christian nationalists, as in people who hate LGBTQ plus people, people who hate trans people, people who hate progressive values, people who hate representation, people who hate wokeness. All of that aligns perfectly with the right, which is why you'll see Jackson Hinkle now. He's on InfoWars, right? Now you'll see fucking this, where he's trying to sell the idea, Haz is trying to sell the idea of MAGA communism to Tim Pool's audience and stuff like that. The problem is, from an economic standpoint, the right wants nothing to do with you. Right? If you sit there and you're starting to talk about, well, I kind of believe in the collective ownership of the means of production, so that either there should be a state authority that comes on in order to both control and oversee and redistribute that, but more importantly, it needs to happen at the level of the actual workers themselves having collective ownership over the means of production, which I would argue personally myself, this is not me a bit, I would argue personally myself, is what a lot of state-run communist countries get wrong. If you have a state-run capitalist country, right, which is what China is, for example, you are still going to have the exact same problems. In fact, China is capable of producing billionaires at a faster rate than America is. That's the problem I see with that specific model, and the model that you always see of kind of like hardliners when it comes to communism. They'll be like, well, that China does communism well, and it's like, but that's not communism, is it? Not like and pure state control over industry, which again, you can point towards things that were done under the USSR, such as a very large land acquisition and redistribution to a lot of the citizens. That one is certainly something you can point towards. But when you point simply towards state-run industries, those state-run industries is not the same thing as allowing the workers to have control over the means of the production, thereby giving them democracy in the relationship that one has between the worker, the employer, and the employee. Because that's a lot of what Marxist theory was about relationships between different entities.
Exchange of like views for dollars.
So you're saying that that signature is is intellectual property. No matter where the content is posted,
I think he's
the revenue comes to me.
Incorporating crypto.
Well, I wouldn't say it's intellectual property, because there's nothing preventing someone, for just like an NFT, for example, there's nothing preventing someone for like downloading the JPEG and doing whatever they want with it. What they can't do is fake the signature.
But what does that do for the person who made it?
It gives you a signature. It confirms that it's yours. This is the original thing.
How does it buy my milk? Right, milk, bread, and eggs. Like, are you saying, look, would the state just give me free food? Is everyone going to get free food, or?
No. By the way, I don't. To be clear, the version of the communist system of the 20th century, with rations and with standardization of basically what everyone gets based on what they do, that was a requirement for the goals of those circumstances, which was the immediate modernization of the productive forces from a backward agrarian and feudal economy. In a dynamic information-based economy and increasingly decentralized consumer economy, for example, it's much more similar to China, where there isn't this kind of uniform compensation for what you do. It is measured based on some. So, for example, it can be profit. For example, is a form of the measurability of how successful you are. But I think
so. Let's go back to that point then, specifically on the intellectual property question. Right. If I put up a video that takes hours of research and I record a live, 30 minutes. And then as soon as it uploads, 100 other people re-upload it to their accounts. You're like, how do I profit from that? Are you saying that because the content is verifiably mine, any revenue generated from anyone else just comes to me?
You have to ask the question, when we're entering into this new type of information economy, it's currently outdated how it works. We get revenue in dollars for something, a form of capital that I think is more worth more than money, right? Basically, I think clout is more valuable than money today. I don't know if you would agree.
But it is. But how do you eat, right? You need money to buy food.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I knew that was what it would come down to. If you have a audience of a lot of, let's say, like libertarians, for example, or ANCAPs, and who were just sitting there, they're like, well, bro, you had me at the whole, like, you hate trans people thing, but I'm kind of, you know, a little bit curious, like, how does just having no intellectual property exist at all allow me to do what I do for a living in this situation? And like, I don't think Kaz has an answer to that yet, unless it's about the blockchain. We'll get back to that.
That would be a question of I mean, we want to innovate everything. We're basically talking about a fourth industrial revolution.
I'm curious what his audience was saying. Did they love this stuff? There is no such thing as a MAGA communist. I applaud you for continuing to bring these Muppets on your show so they can continually expose their unbelievable stupidity. Man, this guest is totally depraved from reality, to the point where he's trying to make the argument for what currently exists, i.e., we need something to use to compensate people for their work. Yes, it's called money. It exists. It works. No need to change it. There's no such thing as a MAGA communist. MAGA and communist is an oxymoron. Yeah, they don't like you. You should have, like, never, if you're trying to sell this stuff, you can't sell them on your economic ideas, which, by the way, are kind of all over the place. I don't even know if you've properly thought them out. How are you even going to sell it to, like, your followers? But if you're trying to sell all of these right-wingers on the concept of MAGA communism, stick to the MAGA part. Stick to how you think that the gays are degenerate. If you did that on Timcast, the thing would flow full of people being like, wow, this guy's pretty base. Guess he's got it figured out. Hate the fact that he calls himself a communist, but hey, if he's a communist that hates the queers, we're gonna be best friends. I love these people, and they can get them to go against their own words simply by asking, you're okay with government controlling the means of production, correct? So then you're fine if it controls the government and it's done by Republicans or Trumps. Immediately, he'll say no. As James, like, they all think you're a lefty. That's wild. Because, like, he hates the left. He always says that. He's like, I fucking despise leftists. Leftists are our enemy. Leftists are the real fascists. AOC is a bigger threat to all of us than anyone. And then it's like, they still see you that. They see you as this. Communist says stupid communist things. Well, what a shocker. We're already there. In America, you never owned a home. You didn't even have a mortgage because you will always have to pay property tax. Blah, blah, blah. So basically, all of this universally talking about how stupid they think you are, what a clown you are, it's adorable, what a child, fucking MAGA communist idiot, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. It's just that, like, he's one of those people who's politically homeless. Because, like, if you hate minorities as much as he does, and if you vilify them consistently, and if you just think they're all depraved and sexual freaks and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, you want to brand yourself as a communist. I'm a communist because I think we can have infinite resources because of the blockchain, and also if you look at, like, the conditions that led to maybe, say, the ration system under the USSR, a lot of that had to do with them trying at that period in time to be able to handle a situation where you're moving obviously from a monarchy to one in which may be state controlled and state owned, but we don't have to do that now. I'm not proposing that now. You know, I'm thinking you know, we just have like some new crypto or something.
So we must also think about how to innovate the entire financial system, how money works, how currency
Libcoin, so you can own the libs. Hell yeah.
works, and so on and so on. And I do think that would be connected with things like blockchain.
That's actually just a great slogan. You can own the libs. Have you ever wanted to own the libs? We're not talking about literal, you know, drinking their tears or guzzling their jizz. We're talking about owning them in a new token that you can have. Libcoin. Own the libs.
Technologies.
But I'm just not. I'm not sure I understand. Right? If you don't believe in intellectual property,
yeah,
a signature that.
And by the way, do you see how nice Haz is being right now? Like, it could be because he's like one of those people who's obviously just completely different when he's like by himself on a webcam talking to people than when he's like in a real room with them or something like that. But he's being so nice to Tim, and he's just trying to really calmly like bring people onto his side, right? Like, oh no, we're MAGA communists. We're MAGA like you. So we love Trump. We're Team Trump. We're all going to be for Trump. But at the same time, we want to bring a communist revolution in America. And it's like, oh, so the right hates communists. They think Joe Biden's a communist. That a neoliberal to them is a fucking communist. They that's how much they hate commies. They not only want to learn nothing about it, but that's where they're going. So you're never going to fucking sell them. And clearly Tim's in his mode where he's just making fun of you.
I guess I'm trying to wonder, how would I make money? I don't think you've answered it. How do I make money in a situation where I think
how it would work is that if you have an enterprise, and by the way, enterprise is not a dirty word. There were Soviet enterprises. You will be compensated with resources necessary for what you need to do based on your performance.
So resources.
So if you're successful at reaching people based on your content, then you will be compensated with some kind of, you could call it money. You could call it, Marx theorized about labor vouchers. You can talk about tokens.
Labor vouchers is effectively currency with restricted currency.
Yeah, it can be called whatever. But yes, effectively, you can be compensated with some kind of means of acquiring more based on what you put in.
Money.
Sure, you can call it that. I think the one.
So then,
the reason,
oh my god, man. I've always despised all of the fucking, the fashy faux leftists online because they're all clowns, it's just a fucking collection of bozos all trying to outspank each other. But like, it also makes just anyone who wants to advocate for this kind of stuff look completely ridiculous. If you are sitting there and Tim Pool is fucking spinning you into a beanie, talking to you about how like, all right, so how do I get paid? How do I get milk? My milk. Hey, brass tacks. Daddy needs milk. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, what you could have is, there's even the theoretical concept of labor vouchers and replace that. But yeah, I mean, what do you, money? Sure, yeah, if you want money, yeah. What are you advocating for then? What are you talking about? Did you just want state-run businesses exclusively? Do you want to have some kind of authoritarian regime in which you play a large role in being part of the vanguard or perhaps even one of the leaders itself in the Politburo, and you're going to be able to stand there amongst all, your fucking followers and acolytes and bestow upon them the brilliance of MAGA communism beside Donald Trump?
Signature only
it's the cartoonish nonsense of which could not exist without the age of the internet. You wouldn't just have all these strange ideologies all blended together into complete foolishness like this.
Applies to me personally. That means I own that signature and have ownership of the content that I produce, because if it's reposted anywhere but it all reverts to my signature and compensates me, that means I own the intellectual property.
Right, but this is a form of effective ownership. It's not a form of ownership enforced by a third party. It's a form of ownership that is self-evident in the product. So, for example, I own my personality. I don't need to have the government say, this is Hawes's personality, no one else can have it. As an original person, it's a form of effective...
What if someone takes the content...
He's not even letting him finish his weird ramblings. I'm an original, I'm an original, Tim. Okay, shut the fuck up.
Converts the colors, generating a separate key, and then directs the key to themselves to generate revenue. Would there be an adjudicating force?
I think unfortunately, I do believe in a harshness of reality where if this is what people prefer and they like it better, you have to step up your game.
So.
What are you what the fuck is the point of you or any of this shit? If you're getting the lightest of pushback from Tim fucking Pool, where all he's saying is, how do I buy shit? How do I stop people from stealing all of my videos because I like being rich and making lots of money off videos? Sell me on this. If things are working, maybe someone has to propose an alternative or something. I don't know. Yeah. The MAGA communism.
So the issue is, in a reality where someone can spoof a key or alter the content in such a way that it's not transformative, doesn't fall under fair use, like they're literally just trying to repurpose the existing content. Let's just put it this way. They find a way to bypass the blockchain signature by dropping the pitch by a half step or altering the colors, and then they start getting the money from it. I cease to exist overnight. This content doesn't happen.
Again, perhaps under the current circumstances, that's the case for all content creators, but I think we should be a little more appreciative of the possibility that in the future, things will not work the same way as they do now.
Tenant. Oh, is this a Tenant Media exclusive? The Haas interview? Only available on Tenant. Hell yeah. That's wild. So, by the way, if you're going to be advocating today in the modern age, because obviously a lot of things have changed, we have some fancy new technologies, amazing things we can do. You know, we can see ethnic cleansing on our phones every single day, and we just look down and scroll through the social media. So there's certainly more access to new forms of technology that ever before we had. But there's also a lot of movement towards continued automation. We've seen that ever since the Industrial Revolution, and we've seen more and more that corporations under capitalist structure are going to continue to automate, not in order to make workers' lives easier or to make them less mundane, but in order to replace them, in order to produce profit. That seems to be a problem. The solution to a lot of this could be if we, as we have the political system, before we had tyrants, before we had kings and queens, and there was no democracy, and now everyone seems to be pretty down with democracy, except where you work, where you spend like 8 hours a day, every single fucking day. A lot of people don't have any kind of democracy. They don't have any say. They don't have any power over their lives, how much they get paid, how long are their vacations, how much overtime do they have to work, how much will they have to pay in medical bills, will they get any medical support at all? All that kind of stuff is all at the whims of a dictatorship. The dictatorship, of course, being the capitalist corporate structure. So, in order for the workers to have, again, democracy in the workplace and more freedom for them to be able to make decisions, and thereby giving everyone in society more freedom because there's less class antagonism when people own the means of their own production, that's what you are advocating for. Not whatever the fuck gibberish this is. Just nonsense going off about cryptocurrency, fucking rations, and then at the very end being like, yeah, I mean, yeah, if you want to use money, that's cool. And it's basically whatever is already working. That's pretty cool too. Where's Mad Has? Where's Angry Has? Screaming and shouting. Where's him yelling? You know, calling Tim a fucking cucklord and shit like that. Instead, we just have a fucking pacified, quiet, and meek, dare I say, a meek Has who's just like, oh, yeah, if that's what you want. I'm an original human. You know, I'm the original human. I'm the first. Human zero. It's pretty exciting. All right, everybody, I am going to sign off for today, but I'm going to be back tomorrow for 2 streams. It's the double stream. Sorry, things were a little chaotic today. I had to set up that interview. If you missed it, I had an incredible interview with Tamoor Hussain, and it was great. And he's a very intelligent, well-spoken individual who has done a lot of great work, both not only in the video game industry, especially speaking and advocating out for a lot of marginalized communities, and being, you know, a person of color himself, climbing the ladder. It's pretty awesome. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Is it Wednesday or is it Tuesday? Yeah, it is Wednesday. Nice. All right, so tomorrow's a regular stream. It'll be at 11 a.m. Come on YouTube's, come on Twitch, come on theserfs.tv. Find it everywhere. The things are sold, and we're going to cover a lot more of it. So, yeah, I will see you tomorrow. I love you all and you're valid. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye.